the light. Turning into darkness, you'd be my escape. Will you follow me when the sky starts to change? Yeah, we won't be afraid. We'll never be the same again.
You're streaming with the Fantasy Follow.
Fantasy Follow.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in live here streaming on our YouTube channel to a special TFF Live Saturday Stars edition. Tonight we got a whole bunch of information to go through with you, and we're here to answer your fantasy football questions all show, getting you ready for tomorrow's Week 11 action. Saturday Stars, we have the top matchups slated for tomorrow and Monday night's games. Not necessarily a start set, but the information we got for you tonight is going through all of the top matchups based on teams that they're playing and whatnot. Not in any ranked order, but just kind of give you a rundown of some of the things to look for in tomorrow's fantasy football matchups. And, of course, answering your questions all show. And right away, we have an early question here from Blue Crew. Welcome back, Blue Crew. Recognize you from before. And you say half-point PPR, starting Adam Thielen, T. Higgins at wide receiver, Kamara and Zeke at running back, Claypool at flex, sitting Godwin, Kupp, McKissick. Your thoughts? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. I got a nice new tool for you guys tonight on the show. And we actually have the matchup numbers for you right up on the screen. So let's start with your wide receivers, and we'll put that up on the screen. Here is the top fantasy points to wide receivers. Adam Thielen for Minnesota playing Dallas. Dallas allowing the third most points to wide receivers. T. Higgins for Cincinnati playing against, what do we got here? I'll find it somewhere on my rundown. Should be easier than this, Joe. You just wrote all these down. Playing Washington. Washington very low, 31st, second fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Let's take a look at the running back to see your lineups there. Kamara and Zeke. I don't have any issue with either of these. Kamara for New Orleans. Let's see here. Playing Atlanta in an early game. Atlanta is, where are they on the list there? They are pretty low down, but still having Kamara for the Saints is not an issue. You're going to start him every week. Zeke for Dallas. Dallas playing against Minnesota. Minnesota middle of the pack at 19. Claypool at your flex. I like that a lot. Pittsburgh is playing, let's see here, Jacksonville. Jacksonville's pretty high up on that list there. They're at 9th. My only thought is possibly T. Higgins as your starter. I've liked T. Higgins all year, but I think of all of the guys you're looking at, T. Higgins is probably the lowest of your matchups. I think this is going to be a tough one for Joe Burrow. I actually have him on our tomorrow show. I'm going to have him as one of my quarterback sits. And I'm actually going to have Tyler Boyd as one of my wide receiver sits. So I think Higgins kind of falls in that line. It's a tough matchup. Again, Washington, the second fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. So I would say for your consideration, Washington playing against Cincinnati, if we go to the running back list, Cincinnati is currently the 18th most fantasy points to the running back spot. However, in terms of actual yardage, look this up for my notes because I have these on my starts. So I have Antonio Gibson as a start tomorrow, and I think McKissick falls in line with that as well. Although they are the 18th most fantasy points to the running back spot, they're allowing the 6th most rushing yards. I think that would potentially make J.D. McKissick a possibility. Would you be a consideration to possibly move Claypool into your starting wide receiver spot in place of Higgins? And that would open up your flex for McKissick. That's the only thing I see there. I don't see any issue with sitting Godwin and Kupp. Just taking a look at the Rams playing. Let's see here. I'm not high on Jared Goff this week by any means. The Rams are playing Tampa Bay, tough defense. I don't have an issue with sitting him. I don't have an issue with sitting Godwin. Same thing against the Rams. Of anything there, I would think that potentially, and again, this is kind of my deal with any of these, is I'll give you my opinions. But as I always say, bottom line, you guys know your rosters better than anybody. Make that decision, go with your gut. But to me, I think you could consider moving Claypool because Claypool's got a great matchup in place of Higgins, sliding Higgins out, opening up that flex spot for J.D. McKissick. I do think the running backs are going to have a nice day against Cincinnati for the Washington football team. That would be my consideration. Again, Blue Crew, so happy to have you back with the stream. Glad to see you again. And by all means, look forward to seeing you again. Appreciate the question, and let me know how it works out. And if you got any more thoughts throughout the rest of the show, please feel free to hit me back up in the chat. All right, we will put the notification back up. The live chat is open right now. We are here all show to answer your fantasy football questions, whether it be about lineups or anything else. We'll be glad to go through that with you. Even if we are doing something else or going through other content, we will, as soon as we see one of those chat notifications pop up, we'll move right over to it. That's what we're here for. That's what we'd like to do. So feel free, even if you hear us talking about something else, to jump on over and hit us in the live chat. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with the content for tonight's show, and it is called Saturday Stars. And basis of tonight's show is going through the top matchup plays for tomorrow's games for Week 11 of fantasy football. Now, again, this is not necessarily a start-sit list. These are not ranked in any specific order. We will do the starts and sits tomorrow live on our Sunday pregame show at 12 noon right here on our YouTube channel. This is more just a rundown of the nice plays that are sitting out there to watch for throughout the day. Perhaps some of these players are players that you have on your roster. Perhaps you're playing against them. It's just kind of a rundown of the different players. Before we do that, let me jump back over to comments. I see one more. Oh, no problem. Blue Crew says thank you for your feedback. No, again, thank you, Blue Crew. We appreciate all of you regular viewers for sure. And if you're new to the stream, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in the chat and stay with us throughout the night. We'll go through all our information for you. Thank you, Blue Crew. All right, the first of our Saturday stars, meaning the stars that we predict tonight will have big games tomorrow. Starting at the quarterback spot, I've got Ben Roethlisberger playing at Jacksonville tomorrow. The Jaguars currently giving up the third most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. Jacksonville has allowed 24 or more fantasy points to 6 quarterbacks this year. They have given up 300 or more yards 5 times. And Roethlisberger has been 25-plus fantasy points his last 2 games and has had 2 or more touchdowns all but 1 game. I think this is a nice spot for Roethlisberger tomorrow. I think there is plenty to go around for all of the receivers there. Juju, Claypool, and Deontay Johnson. I like them all. When I do starts and sits tomorrow, I will say that Claypool is the player that I chose to be among my top starts, the top 5, that is. But I think it's a nice spot for all of them. The only player who I don't necessarily like as much tomorrow from Pittsburgh is actually James Conner. Even though Jacksonville is allowing fantasy points to the running back spot, Conner the last few weeks has kind of been a little bit of a disappearing act there. Pittsburgh has kind of elected to throw the ball pretty much exclusively. I don't know if they're trying to protect Connor for the end of the season, but certainly Pittsburgh loves to throw it. That's another reason why I love Roethlisberger tomorrow. I don't think he takes the foot off the gas, even if they get the lead against Jacksonville, which they likely will. He didn't take his foot off the gas last week, and I don't expect it this week either. So I've got Ben Roethlisberger as a Saturday star, top matchup for tomorrow's Week 11. All right, the next guy on the list staying at the quarterback spot here, it's Justin Herbert from the LA Chargers playing against the New York Jets. This is a home game. The Jets allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. Herbert has been great all year, and I don't think anything changes for the rookie this week. The Jets have given up 24 or more fantasy points to 4 quarterbacks this year. They are allowing the 4th most passing yards in the league. Herbert, 6 straight games with 21 or more fantasy points and has had 2 or more touchdowns in all 6 of those games. Again, looking at the other players in that roster, Keenan Allen, I think, is an auto start. I did not even include him on my start list this week because I feel at this point he is an auto start. Mike Williams, I think, is a great start tomorrow. I think there's going to be plenty to go around. I think if Herbert's your starting quarterback, you love it. It's a great matchup. I know I have him in a couple of spots. If he's a guy that you drafted, well done for taking a shot on a rookie when he might not even play. Or if he's a guy that you picked up on the waiver wire, same deal. Well done. He's been great so far, and look for him to continue that production there. All right, that's the 2 quarterbacks that we have Saturday stars-wise. Got a few more at the other spots. Moving over to the wide receiver spot. And the first guy I got here is Adam Thielen, the top matchup for tomorrow's games. Now, Thielen, last week I had him as a sit against Chicago, and he had a nice game. Surprised me, and but well done for those of you that did stick with him and play him. I thought a tough matchup against the Bears, and he played well. So therefore, I thought he was deserving of being included on starts for this week. Although some may say he's an auto start because of putting him on the sit list last week. I felt like I owed it to Adam Thielen to put him up here as a Saturday star. Playing Dallas this week, allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. That is a home game, so no weather issues. Dallas has allowed 16 or more fantasy points to 12 wide receivers. This is week 11. They've allowed 16 or more to 12 wide receivers. So, again, we love players playing against Dallas right now until something changes. They've given up 100 or more receiving yards to 5 players throughout the year. Interestingly, according to the stats that I looked up, and I had to double look at this, it has Dallas listed as the 11th fewest passing yards allowed. Even as I'm reading this, I'm not sure that I wrote that down wrong, but I definitely looked at it again. But the fact that they're fewer on the yards and higher up on the points simply means they're giving up all sorts of touchdowns to your wide receivers. So no reason not to love starting Adam Thielen, and I think Justin Jefferson will be in that same boat. I don't see any reason not to. I simply think that Thielen being the top guy there, Dallas has not shown that they can cover. So, those situations where they lock down the top guy and it leaves Jefferson open, I don't see that happening. I certainly think Jefferson will get his, but I like Thielen to be the leading player among their wide receiver core tomorrow. Last week, 20.3 fantasy points and 2 touchdowns against the Bears. Again, a tough matchup for Thielen, and he came through for you. I expect him to do so again this week, so I've got Adam Thielen as a Saturday star top matchup for tomorrow's Week 11 fantasy football. All right, the next guy on the list, another guy who you're going to look at and you're going to say, well, wait a minute, Joe, Amari Cooper. I mean, he's a big-name guy. Isn't he an auto start? Well, no, he's kind of not an auto start this year, given all the troubles that Dallas has had since that awful injury to Dak Prescott at their quarterback spot. So I'm including Amari Cooper among my Saturday stars, and they're playing, again, the Vikings. I do think that this is a spot where Cooper kind of gets it going again with Andy Dalton moving back into the lineup. Minnesota currently allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. I certainly don't expect, necessarily a big blow-up day per se from Cooper, but I do think he's going to be just fine for you. Minnesota has given up 22 or more fantasy points, 5 to 5 wide receivers this year. They're allowing the 6th most passing yards in the league. Amari Cooper has not had a touchdown since week 6. So I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say that he breaks that streak tomorrow and finds the end zone again. I've got Amari Cooper as a top matchup for week 11. All right, the next guy on the list is going to be Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry from the Washington football team, playing against Cincinnati Bengals. That is a home game for Washington. Cincinnati currently allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. They have allowed 17 or more fantasy points. Well, it's my notes say every week. Okay, except week 1. I was going to say even every week except for week 1 is tremendous. That's a great spot for your receivers there. Last week, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, all 20 or more fantasy points in a PPR scoring format last week. They're giving up the 7th most passing yards in the league. I love this spot playing Cincinnati. McLaurin, 7 catches now in 4 straight games and has had a touchdown in 2 of those 4. I think with Alex Smith back there under center, certainly nice to see Alex Smith back in the lineup again, and we hope that things continue to go well for him after that terrible injury that he had suffered. I think steady quarterback play. I think McLaurin gets it done. I love him tomorrow. If you have him in your lineup, I would look for him to do great things. And again, I have Terry McLaurin as a Saturday star, top matchup for tomorrow's Week 11 games. Next guy on the list here at the wide receiver spot, it's Chase Claypool for the Pittsburgh Steelers playing at Jacksonville. The Jaguars allowing the 9th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Jacksonville, 6 players this year have scored 16 or more fantasy points against them at the wide receiver spot, and they have given up 100 or more yards 5 times in the last 5 games. They're currently allowing the 3rd most passing yards in the league. And again, Claypool has averaged just over 10 targets over his last 3 games, 3 touchdowns in those 3. He certainly is amongst, you surely never know which one of those guys is going to have the big day. All 3 had a nice day last week. I think there's plenty to go around for all of them. I like Deontay Johnson. I think probably, from what we've seen throughout the year, Johnson and Claypool to me are the 2 guys that you look for, with Juju kind of being if he gets some too, then great. But I would say even though Juju was certainly the highest, going back to draft time for this year that you might have drafted, I certainly think Johnson and Claypool have kind of emerged in that offense as the top guys there. So again, I think Claypool has a nice day tomorrow, as Johnson does. I think in general the passing game is going to be high scoring again tomorrow. Looking for Chase Claypool as a Saturday star. All right, those are the wide receivers that we got here. Before we move on to our next spot, let's put up our information about our Sunday pregame show. We are streaming live right here on our YouTube channel every Sunday at 12 noon, taking you right up until game time, answering all your fantasy football questions, and getting you ready for your matchups each week. And we will also put up the information about us. We are the Fantasy Follow. We are a brand new YouTube channel this year. So if you're with us for the first time, we appreciate you being here. If you're a return viewer, again, we appreciate seeing you again. But either way, make sure and click that subscribe button. As a new channel, we don't necessarily come up quite as high on the searches yet until we get a chance as we continue to grow. So we definitely want you to be able to get those notifications to let you know whenever we have new content, just as we did with tonight's show. Not our regularly scheduled show, but just kind of an impromptu Saturday show. Then we went with it. So, again, you can also find us on Twitter. And it is at the Fantasy Follow, and that's fantasy spelled FNTSY. And you can send us your fantasy football questions during the week to our Twitter account using the hashtag AskTFFLive, and we will answer those questions live on our Sunday pregame show. Facebook / the Fantasy Follow, and our website, thefantasyfollow.com. All right, let's go ahead and get back to our Saturday Stars, top matchups to look for in tomorrow's Week 11 of fantasy football. Going into the running back spot now, I've got Mike Davis as a Saturday star, top matchup tomorrow, playing against Detroit. That game, although the graphic says at Detroit, that is actually that is a mistype on my part on the graphic. That is a home game versus Detroit. So that is Carolina at home. The Lions allowing the most fantasy points to the running back spot. And they have given up 17 or more fantasy points to 6 running backs in the last 4 games alone. 3 rushing touchdowns last week to Washington, the combination of McKissick and Gibson. And they are allowing the 3rd most rushing yards in the league. Davis has had a couple of down weeks after being very good in replacement of Christian McCaffrey. Again, McCaffrey is out for tomorrow's game. If you picked up Davis off the waiver wire, he probably has been a productive player for you most of the way. A couple of down games here. However, he has actually had the most catches. The second most catches among all receivers. I'll get it right. Among all running backs this year, second only to Alvin Kamara. So clearly Mike Davis, especially since you got to figure he didn't play full-time all those games. He's had a great season, especially if you're playing PPR. And again, when Christian McCaffrey got hurt, I really thought he was going to have a good chance to kind of do that and fill that spot nicely, not only as a runner, but also as a pass catcher out of the backfield. So again, playing against the Lions have been leaking fantasy points to the running back spot. Mike Davis, I think, is a great start tomorrow, and I have him as a Saturday star, one of the top matchups for Week 11. All right, the next guy on the list, I've got Nyheim Hines from the Indianapolis Colts, an interesting one here. The Colts playing at home against the Green Bay Packers. Packers are allowing the third most fantasy points to the running back position. Obviously, there are a bunch of players there in Indianapolis that could get a share in that between Wilkins, Taylor, and Hines. I like Hines as the hot hand in recent weeks. He has had 21 or more fantasy points 2 of the last 3 games. I also like Hines because you have to assume, although Indianapolis has been very good defensively this year, you have to assume that Green Bay is the more likely team to play with the lead for most of this game. Not necessarily going to be the case. This could be one of those kind of grind them out games. Hard to say. But if that is the case, then certainly game script would tell you that Hines is going to get more opportunity as a pass catcher in addition to whatever he gets as a rusher. In terms of Green Bay, they have given up 15 or more fantasy points to 6 running backs in the last 7 games. And they have given up 26 or more fantasy points to 2 running backs in the last 5 games, currently allowing actually the 12th fewest rushing yards allowed, but again, the third most fantasy points. That tells you they're giving up a lot of touchdowns, and that is what is carrying that matchup number. So I like Nyheim Hines tomorrow. We will see what happens between Jonathan Taylor, Jordan Wilkins. If anything is different there, I like Hines if you pick him up off the waiver wire. I know that I have him in a spot, at least one spot tomorrow, and I'm definitely playing him in my lineup. I think this is a nice matchup for Nyheim Hines as a Saturday star. All right, the next guy that I've got here, I've got Adrian Peterson from the Detroit Lions. The Lions playing at the Carolina Panthers. Now, there is no DeAndre Swift tomorrow. Swift will not be playing. So you have Peterson and the reemergence of Kerryon Johnson there in the backfield. I think that Peterson will get the bigger share of the workload there, and Carolina giving up the 4th most fantasy points to the running back spot. This is going to be a running game on both sides if the matchups hold. 24 or more fantasy points allowed by Carolina to 5 running backs this year. And obviously last week they only gave up 192 rushing yards to Ronald Jones. So again, I like this spot a lot for Peterson. Peterson has actually had less than 10 rushes now in 3 straight games. However, I do expect that workload to change without DeAndre Swift there. We obviously have seen Swift kind of take over that backfield, or at least get the bigger share, which has been great if you drafted Swift. I know I've really liked him as a player as this season's gone on. However, I think that Peterson is in line to be the guy tomorrow. I like him over Kerryon Johnson between those 2 guys in that backfield, and I think it's a nice matchup for some nice value there. So Adrian Peterson, Saturday star, top matchup for Week 11. And the next guy I've got here at the running back spot is going to be Kalen Ballage. New York playing the New York Jets. That's a home game for the Chargers. Ballage has kind of taken over that backfield. No Justin Jackson. Joshua Kelly has not impressed. I think Ballage will get the majority of that work there, and certainly the goal line touches. The Jets allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the running back spot. So I think this is a nice spot for Ballage. Kelly has only seen 23 rushes over the course of the last 3 games. And taking a look at what the Jets allow, they have given up 13 or more fantasy points to 7 running backs this year, and they are allowing the 13th most rushing yards in the league. So I like Kalen Ballage as a Saturday star top matchup for Week 11 of fantasy football tomorrow. All right, before we move on to the next run, let's go ahead and put up our reminder here and let you know that the live chat is open. We are, in addition to going through all of our content tonight, we are here to answer all your fantasy football questions. So even if we're talking about something else, by all means, drop us a chat, and we will move away from whatever we're talking about and get right to those chats. That's what we like to do. We want to talk fantasy football with you guys and find out what you got going on for your matchups tomorrow. So by all means, our live chat is open. Feel free to jump in there with any fantasy football questions that you have throughout the course of the show. All right, and we will get back to our Saturday stars. So next, moving over to the tight end spot, a couple of players here to talk about. And I feel the top matchup tomorrow is Logan Thomas. Again, this is not a start-sit list. These are the top matchups, not necessarily ranked in how I feel they may play out tomorrow. I'll have those start-sit lists for you on our Sunday pregame show tomorrow, streaming live at noon, taking you right up until game time. This is just a rundown of the top matchups for tomorrow and Monday night's games. And I feel like Logan Thomas has a nice one playing against the Bengals. Cincinnati currently allowing the second most fantasy points to the tight end spot. They have given up 10 or more fantasy points to tight ends 6 times this year. Thomas, last week, 10.6 fantasy points. He's had a nice little run, 10 or more in 3 of his last 4 games. Again, a little bit more stability at the quarterback spot there definitely helps for Logan Thomas. If you're streaming tight ends, obviously it is a tough situation. Thomas is a guy that has a chance to return some value for you tomorrow. So I have him as a Saturday star, one of the top matchups for Week 11. All right, the next guy I've got here at the tight end spot, it's Eric Ebron from the Pittsburgh Steelers, a guy I've talked about a lot in past weeks, talking about waiver wire pickups and whatnot. He's had a great run of matchups, and I believe that's what's given him so much value at this point. Jacksonville, this game is at Jacksonville. The Jaguars are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. They have given up 7 touchdowns to tight ends this year. Ebron has averaged over 6 targets in his last 4 games and has had 2 touchdowns in those 4 games. Again, I do think that even though you would have to expect Pittsburgh to be the team with the upper hand in this game, score-wise, game script-wise, we did not see the Steelers take their foot off the gas last week and suddenly, turn to Connor to work the clock and run the ball. So I wouldn't see any reason why they would do that again. Wouldn't do that again this week. I would expect them to keep the foot on the pedal. And Eric Ebron is one of those guys that can benefit from that. So I've got him as a Saturday star top matchup for Week 11. All right, the next guy on the list here is a guy that I've been high on all year, and that's Hayden Hurst, tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. They are playing at the Saints. New Orleans allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the tight end spot this season. The Saints have given up 10 or more fantasy points 6 times this year, and Hurst has had 10 or more fantasy points now in 4 straight games and also has had 50 or more yards in all 4 of those games. We do expect Calvin Ridley to be back in the lineup tomorrow, so that certainly means a little bit of a reduced workload probably for Hurst. Full complement of their receivers there with Julio and Calvin Ridley and the rest of the crew. I do think that still leaves plenty of room for Hurst in this matchup. Difficult to say how this is going to shake out from a game script look. It's going to be very interesting to watch this game without Drew Brees to see. Obviously we thought that it might be Jameis Winston, but it's not. It's going to be Taysom Hill, according to all reports. That is such a wild card. I don't know. We'll talk about this more on tomorrow's show. I don't know what that means for New Orleans. I would expect that Alvin Kamara still continues to see a high usage. I don't know what in the world that means for Michael Thomas. And if you've got him on rosters, you drafted him high, as I did in a couple of spots this year. It's been frustrating waiting for him. And now that he's back, we have this to deal with. I don't know if Taysom Hill has any value fantasy-wise as a quarterback. I would think that in standard leagues, 1-quarterback leagues, probably not. Although I will have to say, in one league where I have Drew Brees on my roster, I did pick up Taysom Hill in kind of in a let's see what happens type deal. Certainly you would expect a more, I guess a less conventional is the right way to put it, offense out of the Saints. If Taysom Hill is very effective running the ball, which he could be against Atlanta, he could necessarily return some value tomorrow as a quarterback, with a nice floor because of his rushing yards. I have no idea what to expect. This is a very interesting game to watch. and see what happens. But at any rate, we're talking the other side of it right now, and that's Hayden Hurst. I do think this is a very nice matchup for Hurst. I like him as a Saturday star, top matchup for Week 11. And the next guy on the list here is Hunter Henry from the LA Chargers, playing against the New York Jets. That is a home game. The Jets allowing the 10th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. They have given up 10 or more fantasy points to 5 different tight ends this year, and they allowed 109 yards receiving to Travis Kelce in Week 8. Obviously, Travis Kelce is who he is, and that is what he does quite often. Henry, 13 fantasy points with a touchdown last week against Miami. We've seen some weeks where he had some good spots where he didn't necessarily have the big games. I think that Justin Herbert is plenty comfortable going to his wide receivers, so it hasn't been a situation where you're looking for the easy underneath throws that the tight end has taken advantage of. But I think certainly that Hunter Henry has tremendous potential in that offense still. I do think this is a nice spot for Henry tomorrow, and I have him as, not only do I have him as a Saturday star top matchup, but as I reveal my starts and sits tomorrow on the Sunday pregame show, he will be, in fact, my top start at the tight end spot. So I definitely like Hunter Henry as a Saturday star top matchup for Week 11. All right, that's our run through of the players. So let's get another promo back up here for you guys. And again, we will remind you about the TFF Live Sunday pregame show. That is tomorrow, streaming live right here on our YouTube channel at 12 noon. We're with you right up until game time. We go through all the information throughout the day for you, including actives, inactives, recap of last week. We try to find out some info from around the league for you, player updates, starts and sits, all that good stuff. And then we mix in your chat questions all throughout that show as well. So join us tomorrow. That's TFF Live Sunday pregame, and that's our regular show every Sunday. And again, I will also add the rest of our information that is up here. And we are the Fantasy Follow. We are a brand new channel on YouTube. We appreciate you being with us. If you are a new viewer or if you are returning, we appreciate you coming back. If you're watching the show on replay, please leave us your comments below. Let us know what you think about these players, or if you have other players that you feel should be on these rundowns. And by all means, if you would like to give us a thumbs up or a share, then of course we appreciate that. But most importantly, make sure if you haven't done so to click that subscribe button. As a new channel, we don't necessarily come up quite as high on the searches. As we continue to grow, we want to make sure that you are able to receive those notifications and find out whenever we have new content available for you. So click that subscribe button, and also it will help us to reach our goal of 100 new subscribers. You can also find us on Twitter at the Fantasy Follow, and that's fantasy spelled FNTSY. You can also send us your fantasy football questions during the week to our Twitter account using the hashtag AskTFFLive, and we will answer those questions live on our Sunday pregame show. Facebook/the Fantasy Follow, and our website, fantasyfollow.com. All right, we got a little bit. I'm going to put up this notification about our comments here. We got a little bit of time to go through the games tomorrow. So just taking a look at the different games and kind of throwing out thoughts for tomorrow. And feel free, if you have thoughts on anything that we're going through in these games, to jump in the chat and let us know what you think. But until then, we leave our reminder up there that our live chat is open, answering any of your fantasy football questions throughout the show. So even if we're talking about something else, by all means, feel free to jump in the chat, ask us your questions, and we will jump off from whatever else we're talking about and get to those as soon as we can. So looking at the rundown of games tomorrow, 10 o'clock Pacific time, as they listed on Yahoo that I'm looking at here. So this is the 1 o'clock window. Let's see. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in the 1 o'clock window, 4 games at 4 o'clock, and, of course, the Sunday night game and the Monday night game. So starting off, Philadelphia at Cleveland. Now, here's the first piece of information from this game that I've seen so far. It is not looking like a good weather game in Cleveland tomorrow. So this is going to impact some of your decisions. Certain players that you may have looked to in this game, perhaps Jalen Reagor or Travis Fulgham as wide receivers. I don't know what you're going to get from them. If the weather does end up being, I think they were talking about like 70% chance of showers. Obviously, the weather in Cleveland has been an issue. interesting to see how that runs in this game. I think Miles Sanders probably has a nice game. Let's go ahead and put up, let me see here, the matchup information in this one. So in terms of the running back spot, which I think is what you're going to see a lot of in this game tomorrow. So Philadelphia, they are 22nd in terms of fantasy points allowed to the running back spot, and Cleveland is 23. So both of them a little bit farther down the line. However, I do think that Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb will be just fine. I have Kareem Hunt will be one of my starts on tomorrow's show when we go through those. And also I think Nick Chubb, I don't include him really in the starts because I feel like he's an auto start based on where he was drafted. I think Miles Sanders is a nice play tomorrow. I don't know what you expect there at other spots because of the weather. So I'm looking to the running backs for this game tomorrow. And again, that's why we put up the fantasy points that are being allowed in that position. Although the numbers are a little bit lower, I think you like those players tomorrow, or at least I do, to have nice games either way. Who knows what happens? Carson Wentz has just been so all over the map this year. No clue what happens there from the quarterback spot. Obviously, we see Jalen Reagor working his way back in, Alshon Jeffrey potentially. Goddard did not have a great game last week. We saw Richard Rodgers get some more work. Hard to say what happens there, but I do like this as a running game on both sides, especially if the weather does continue to be an issue. All right, the next game on the rundown here at the 1 o'clock window, Atlanta and New Orleans. This, of course, we talked about this a little bit already. This is an extremely interesting game to me. I think on the Atlanta side, and let's put up the wide receiver stuff because I think Atlanta is going to throw the ball, and I think they will just be fine. New Orleans currently 14th most fantasy points to the wide receivers. I would expect Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley to be nice plays tomorrow either way. At the running back spot, hard to say what happens there, but let's see. New Orleans gives up. They are the fewest fantasy points to the running back spot, and I will actually have Todd Gurley among my sits on tomorrow's show. So again, I do think the wide receivers are where it's at in this game. I don't know, again, what in the world can you expect on this New Orleans side? But in terms of, you expect Kamara to be good regardless of matchup. So I think the matchup that you're looking at there is Michael Thomas. What does Atlanta do to the wide receiver spot? And Atlanta, let's see, is second most fantasy points to the wide receivers. So if Taysom Hill has anything tomorrow in terms of passing production, then let's hope, for all of you who drafted Michael Thomas, including me in a couple of spots, let's hope that this thing gets turned around. I definitely can say that in the spots where I have him, I mean, it went through my mind when looking at setting those lineups, like, is it possible that Michael Thomas ends up on your bench tomorrow because of Taysom Hill? I don't know that you can do that because it's too hard to say how this is going to play out right now until we actually see what happens. But I think you're going to know pretty quick. You're going to find out what happens there. You're going to find out if Taysom Hill has any production fantasy-wise, perhaps if you're playing like a super flex 2 QB league, something of that sort. Who knows what might happen there, but that's the second matchup that we're looking at tomorrow. All right, as we continue to go through these matchups again, our live chat is open. Feel free to jump in the chat. Even if we are talking about anything else, we will answer your fantasy football questions. That's what we're here for. That's what we love to do, is talk fantasy football with you guys. So by all means, we will continue along the look of games tomorrow. And the next game up is Cincinnati at the Washington FT. Another interesting game here. No Joe Mixon tomorrow. We'll have Giovanni Bernard in terms of the running back spot for Cincinnati. Let's take a look at the matchups according to running backs for tomorrow. And actually, before we continue with that, I do see a comment here. So let me jump on over and see what we have. All right. We got a question or comment here from Jay Postman 425. Welcome back, Jay Postman. And you say, I've got Taysom Hill starting at my tight end spot. Yeah, I've heard of some platforms where this is available. It says, so that should definitely win me my week. Jalen Samuels for the Pittsburgh Steelers was another guy that's been listed as a tight end recently. I want to say that might have been last year. I don't know if it could have been the year before with Pittsburgh when he was kind of taking over that running back spot due to injuries. This is really, I've heard about this. Now, I don't believe this is available in Yahoo, which is where, I actually play my leagues. So I haven't talked about it too much. But yeah, you've turned your lineup into a 2 QB lineup, which is nice. Again, looking at So if you're going to consider Hill and his running back potential, again, fantasy points to running backs, Atlanta actually, so they're fourth fewest to the running back spot. A little bit surprised at that. I would have thought it was a little bit higher, but you would expect it might be potentially a higher scoring game where at least you're going to see some goal line carries for Hill. I have to think that's going to be where his value is going to be, but I am very interested to see how he is as a passer. And for that matter, if what we're hearing is actually how it plays out, because we really don't know if Sean Payton is actually going with him, or if we see Jameis Winston a little bit more, or some sort of a mix. I have a weird prediction that I have in the back of my mind for this game tomorrow, and I'm actually thinking that Taysom Hill's first touchdown pass as a starter will somehow be to Jameis Winston. I just somehow feel like that has to happen at this point after everything that's happened with the switch up there. So who knows? Just an interesting spot. But and Jay Postman, you say, yeah, it's on ESPN. I did see that as well. I don't play on any leagues on ESPN, but I did hear that. I can't imagine that they will leave him there much longer. I mean, Breeze is on IR, so it's not like this is the only week where he's probably going to be their starter. So I would have to think they're going to revisit that at some point. But for now, you got it. Go with it. I'm sure he was a big pickup in all those leagues. So, yeah, interesting to see how that plays out. Thank you again, Jay Postman. Welcome back. Glad to see you again. And by all means, join us anytime and feel free to jump in throughout the rest of our show. Oh, I got to see a follow-up. I'll get it right up on the screen. From what I've heard, Winston isn't going to get any work this game, and Hill is playing the entirety of the game. I've heard that as well. But again, how much do you trust coach speak? How much do you trust the reports? I certainly think that there are some tricks up Sean Payton's sleeve. It won't surprise me at all if that happens tomorrow. Even if Winston doesn't necessarily play much of a role in the offense, it won't surprise me to see him on the field, even if he's not involved in the plays, just to kind of, throw a wrench into everything. So, yeah, I would expect Winston to at least get some play, even if he doesn't throw a single pass, run a single route, or anything of that sort. It would surprise me if we just see Winston sit on the bench the entire time. But, they paid Hill all that money. They believe in him. I do also think that what hasn't been talked about much is that at this point, with Breeze on IR and not knowing kind of the future of Drew Brees, like this also provides a little bit of an opportunity. They probably know exactly what they have in Jameis Winston. This provides a little bit of an opportunity to see what they have in Taysom Hill, not only go out and try to win games, but also, even if they do believe in it, also kind of gauge where they're at for the future of their team. So I kind of like this play from that standpoint. I don't think it's been talked about a lot because I don't think anybody's really discounting Drew Brees as a future starter, but certainly he's been hurt a lot this year. And I think given the fact that he kind of took himself out of the game last week, I wouldn't be surprised if there is some thought in New Orleans to where they're like, all right, this is a good chance. Let's find out what Taysom Hill has. We've paid him like we believe in him. Let's get him in there. And if they do believe in him, it's kind of a twofold thing where they're also going to kind of see what he has for the rest of the way. So, yeah, interesting one on Sunday Ticket. I'm sure I'll be flipping through this game quite a bunch, especially since my Buffalo Bills are on bye and I can watch other games and not worry about the Bills games. So, yeah, this will be an interesting one. So, again, thank you, Jay Postman. We will put this notification back up and let all of you know that our live chat is open, answering your fantasy football questions all show. So please feel free, even if we're talking about something else, to jump in the live chat, drop us a note, leave us your question. We love talking fantasy football with you guys, and that is absolutely what we're here for. And I do see one right away, so we'll get right to that before we go to anything else. And this is from Zach Conroe. Let me know if I didn't say that right, Zach, but welcome to the stream. You look like a new viewer, so glad you found us and glad to have you with us. And you say, should I start Lamb, Hines, or Woods in full PPR? Okay, so I'm going to assume this is your flex decision. Let's take a look at the matchups. First of all, I will tell you before I even talk my way through this, I believe Nyheim Hines is going to be the play here. But I'm going to put up some information just to kind of discuss and look through all the different options. So CD Lamb for the Dallas Cowboys, they are playing at what time do they play at? Let's see here. They are the 4 o'clock window against Minnesota. The Vikings obviously leaking fantasy points to wide receivers there. As you see on the screen, they are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. I certainly think that CD Lamb has some potential to have a nice game tomorrow. Again, with Andy Dalton back in the folder, you would at least expect that it's better than it's been with Gilbert and DiNucci. However, still obviously not their starter, not Dak Prescott. So, you've got Cooper, who I think is going to be fine tomorrow. You've still got Gallup in the fold. Who knows how that shakes out? So I think that certainly Lamb has a good chance to have an okay day. Taking a look at Robert Woods for the LA Rams. That is the Monday night game playing against Tampa Bay. Now, Tampa Bay has been much stingier. And so in terms of, as we look on the list, fantasy points to the wide receiver spot, Tampa Bay at 25th. So they are the 8th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. I think for sure out of those three players, like Robert Woods is the most, or I should say more of your main guy, the guy you're probably starting in most weeks. So this is someone that you've probably trusted throughout the season. Probably a little bit tougher to sit him than it is the other two guys. So I understand the thought process of potentially taking him. However, if I were going to pick out of these three, and depending on other scenarios, not taking into account who your opponent is, who your opponent's playing, I like Nyheim Hines quite a bit tomorrow. I will go ahead and put this. Let's see, Hines, Indianapolis playing against Green Bay. It's a 4:00 game, and as a home game, Green Bay currently allowing the third most fantasy points to the running back spot. And now I know that the situation with the running backs in Green Bay between Taylor and, you've got Hines there, and you've also got Wilkins. So obviously it's a little bit convoluted, but we have seen Hines get more of the work in previous weeks. He's had 21 or more fantasy points 2 out of the last 3 weeks now. In addition to that, obviously Hines is the pass catcher out of the backfield of those three. If you had to guess, now again, when you're talking about start sits, you're talking about talent, you're talking about volume, you're talking about matchups, and you're talking about game script. The matchup certainly is there for Hines. Game script wise, if you had to guess, to me, I feel like although Indianapolis has been good on defense, certainly there's a good chance that Green Bay could play a lot of this game with the lead, and therefore Indianapolis having to throw the ball more down the stretch, which again, this is potentially more play for Hines as a pass catcher in addition to whatever he gets rushing. So I think, again, out of these three plays, Lamb is a decent matchup as a receiver. Woods is a guy you've relied on, and Hines is a guy you literally might have picked up on the waiver wire this week. This is easier. I always say this. It's easier when I'm talking about when I'm not invested. Like if this was my team, I would struggle with this pick also. But looking at it objectively, I think Hines has a great matchup, has a good chance to have good game script, and I also think that his volume could be there. So I actually, out of these three, I like Hines. Again, like I always say, my opinions, but your roster best. Go with your gut. I offer my opinions and some information to back it up to help you out with that decision. I don't think that Hines is a bad play by any means here, but would love to hear how it works out for you. And again, thank you, Zach, for being with us on the stream. And if you are a new viewer, by all means, feel free to stick with us for the rest of the show. But if you want, click that subscribe button. We want to make sure you guys that are new get all those notifications because, again, as a new channel, we don't necessarily come up quite as high on the searches. So we want to make sure that you can get all those notifications whenever we have new content. I see a follow-up here from Jay Postman. I will comment on that as well. He says, I think Woods will be the safest pick. Lamb has completely disappeared, and Hines is iffy because of Taylor and Wilkins getting snaps too. So, yeah, that's pretty much where I was at. That's very similar thoughts as well. I like Hines because I do think that this is a nice spot, and I think that for whatever reason, Taylor has kind of fallen out of favor there a little bit there, and I certainly think Hines, I put him ahead of Wilkins. And I see a follow-up here from Zach. Yeah, it's tough. All three of these players haven't been on my team for a long time. I appreciate it. No, absolutely, Zach. Appreciate you being here again. Like I said, we love talking fantasy football. And without you viewers and jumping in the chat with us, we can give you lots of content, but it's just really us talking, and you guys watching. So by all means, we love having you here. Feel free to stop back and watch any of our future shows. And like I said, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can get those notifications. Tonight's show was completely impromptu. Our regular show is on Sundays. And let me go ahead and let's do this. Let's go ahead and put up the promo for our Sunday show, just for anybody that's new that's watching that might not have the information. TFF Live Sunday pregame. We are live streaming right here on our YouTube channel every Sunday at 12 noon. We're taking you right up until game time, and we go through your fantasy football questions then, as well as a whole host of other information, whatever we can give you to get you ready for your matchups each week. So that is our main show. And again, tonight we're here with the Saturday Stars, as we call it, which basically is just an opportunity to kind of go through all the top matchups, not necessarily a start-sit, but more than anything, an opportunity for you, the viewers, to get in the chat and talk fantasy football with us, ask us questions, or let us know how you're doing. Fantasy bad beats, we'd love to hear your stories. By all means, we're making that rush towards the playoffs. So if you're on the stream, our live chat is open. No matter what we're talking about, Joe, go ahead and jump in with any of your questions, and we'll get to those right away. And I believe where we left off, we were going through the individual matchups for tomorrow, and we were talking about Cincinnati and Washington. So again, we were talking about Gio Bernard in the backfield for Cincinnati. And let's put up the running back fantasy matchups here. So Cincinnati against Washington. Washington currently, where are they? 20th in terms of fantasy points allowed to the running back. You'd expect Gio Bernard to get all the work there, so he's certainly a volume play. No reason not to start him in that game if you have been able to pick him up off the waiver wire. On the other side of that, I like this game a lot for Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic, both similar to what I liked last week. Cincinnati, although they are, I'm going to look to my notes for this, although they on the screen, they are 18th in terms of fantasy points to the running back position. In terms of rushing yards allowed, they are, let's see if I can find it here in my notes. They are actually the 6th most rushing yards allowed. So don't be deceived by that 18th. I think this is a nice spot for Gibson and McKissic. I think potentially Cincinnati, again, is a team that throws the ball a lot. So McKissic will have opportunity as a pass catcher. Should this be a higher scoring, more of a passing game? And I think Gibson, by all means, with the goal line touches, Cincinnati allowing the rushing yards, I think it's a great spot for both of them. And in addition to that, I like a lot Terry McLaurin tomorrow. Cincinnati allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot, as you see that on the left of your screen. I like that a lot. Washington a little bit lower, 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers. I do have Tyler Boyd as a sit tomorrow. I'm also a little bit down on T. Higgins, not because I don't like them as players, just because that's a tougher matchup. So that's kind of the lay of the land for that one. All right, let me jump back over here in the chat and see what we got here. We see a new chat here for Gonzo01. Is Swift ruled out for Sunday? Yes, Swift is in the concussion protocol, I believe. Let me double check just to make sure I'm not telling you the wrong thing, but I am nearly certain that it is concussion protocol. So yes, and that is why I actually have Adrian Peterson as a start tomorrow. Wow, how come Swift doesn't come up? For some reason, lots of times when I try to look these up doing these live streams, they don't want to cooperate. So let me just go ahead and go to Detroit instead. Let's take a look. And DeAndre Swift is out, listed as out on the lineup here. And concussion protocol, yes, says will not play in week 11 and said he was a full participant Wednesday, but he's been in concussion protocol and they don't really have much choice with a deal like that. So, yeah, he is out. You're looking at Adrian Peterson and you're looking at Kerryon Johnson also back in the fold tomorrow for Detroit. I like Peterson a lot. Again, let me put up let's go ahead and let me grab the Adrian Peterson graphic that I have for you here. We talked about him a little bit already. And where is he? I'll find him in one moment. There's Peterson. So Adrian Peterson, Carolina allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the running back spot. And again, Peterson, obviously his production and his volume has been down. But in terms of what Carolina allows, we know they've been leaking to the running back spot. And again, 24 more fantasy points to 5 different running backs this year. Carolina has, obviously, Ronald Jones last week, 192 yards. If you look at Peterson as the guy who gets the bulk of the carries, certainly that puts him in line to have a potential nice day. So, yes, it will be Swift out. It will be Peterson in tomorrow. All right, we will put back up our live chat open notification for you as we continue to go through the rest of our information for you. All right, let's go back to the rundown of games, and we'll look at the next game on the slate tomorrow, and that is going to be Detroit and Carolina. Well, lo and behold, we just talked about this one. So, yep, Detroit and Carolina, that's in the 1 o'clock window. That game is in Carolina. This will be an interesting one. Obviously, no Christian McCaffrey again. So if we put up our graphic in terms of the running back matchups, you're looking at Mike Davis on one side, probably Adrian Peterson on the other. So Davis for Carolina going up against Detroit. The Lions allowing the most fantasy points to the running back spot. Again, I love this spot for Mike Davis. I think he's one of your top guys tomorrow. I think he's been great all year. Yes, he's been a little bit down the past few weeks. But again, just in terms of looking at a little bit of research on Davis, he has actually had the second most catches among all running backs this year, second only to Alvin Kamara. So obviously that combined with the rushing potential against Detroit makes for a nice value day for Davis. Again, Detroit 17 or more fantasy points 6 times in the last 4 games to running backs, and 3 rushing touchdowns last week to Washington. That was Gibson and McKissick combined, the 3rd most rushing yards allowed in the league for Carolina. So obviously I like this spot a lot for the Carolina side. On the Detroit side, again, number 4 in terms of what the Panthers allowed are running backs. So you think both sides running backs are going to be just fine tomorrow. Taking a look at the wide receiver side of things. Let's see. Carolina, we don't know if Teddy Bridgewater plays tomorrow. I like him tomorrow if he does. Detroit, where are they on the list here? Somewhere in the middle, 18th to the wide receiver spot. And then Carolina, 21st. So in the bottom half. Don't know, again, with Matthew Stafford tomorrow. Not sure about. He has a thumb injury, I believe it is. So don't know exactly what we're going to get there. No Kenny Galladay. I do like Marvin Jones tomorrow. I know I've kind of been up and down on him since Galladay has been out, but I think someone's got to get that work. And I also think TJ Hawkinson is a nice play tomorrow as well. All right, the next game up is Pittsburgh and Jacksonville. Again, that's in the 1 o'clock window. That is a home game for Jacksonville. And taking a look at the players that I like in that game, I like the receiver core for Pittsburgh a lot. And if you look at the matchups, Jacksonville currently allowing the 9th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. We saw last week that the Steelers felt no reason to take the foot off the gas in terms of throwing the ball. Disappointing for James Conner, but very good for Juju, Chase Claypool, and Deontay Johnson. I expect more of the same tomorrow. I don't think Jacksonville will put up a whole lot of resistance there. I think it'll be a good game for them. I also like Big Ben as a quarterback starter tomorrow. On the other side of things, Jacksonville, the Steelers, although a tough defense, as you see on your list on the left side of your screen there, actually allowing the 11th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. I don't know. I had not seen a report to see if Laviska Shenault is back in. He missed last week. DJ Chark, Keelan Cole, and your quarterback, Jake Luton. Although I heard someone pronounce it differently this week. I'm not sure if it's not Luton. That's the way I've been saying it. But either way, hard to say what's going to happen in that game. I've heard some thoughts about Pittsburgh potentially, this being somewhat of a trap game for them. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But I certainly think that, barring anything strange, it's another nice day of production for those wide receivers for the Steelers. And I also like Eric Ebron as a tight end tomorrow as well. All right, the next game up on the run, Tennessee at Baltimore. This is another interesting game. Both teams, you expect Baltimore has the upper hand in this one. Tennessee has started to falter a little bit in past weeks. Taking a look at the players that you're most concerned with here, obviously Derrick Henry is a player that, if you have him, you're probably not sitting him. However, Baltimore, a tough defense, 24th. So they are the 9th fewest fantasy points to the running back spot. More power to you if you have a deep enough lineup and if you have enough, what's the word I'm looking for? Confidence, let's just say. There was another word I was going to look for, but we'll keep it a cleaner word, to sit Derrick Henry this week. I don't. I'm keeping him in my lineup. But it's a one that you worry about a little bit there. On the other side of things, Baltimore, who knows what happens with their running backs. It's just a mess. It's been that way all year. But Tennessee, let's see, where are they on the list? They are 8th most fantasy points to the running back spot. So whichever one of those guys they decide to give the ball to, if it's Ingram, if it's Dobbins, if it's Edwards, if it's Lamar Jackson taking advantage, who knows? The opportunity is there, and just have to see what happens. From a wide receiver standpoint, not really much to speak of this year on Baltimore's side. We haven't seen a lot from Marquise Brown. But on the Tennessee side, it's A.J. Brown. And I definitely have sat A.J. Brown in the spot where I have him in my lineups tomorrow. Baltimore, the 4th fewest, as you see, fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Of course, A.J. Brown is a top guy. I think it's possible that he still gets, decent value tomorrow. I think he certainly is the more trustable guy there. Corey Davis is among my sits. I did not make A.J. Brown a sit tomorrow. Again, I'll have that list tomorrow on our Sunday pregame show. but I don't love it. And if you've got other options, which is kind of the case for whatever reason in some of my spots where I have Brown, the stars of a line, and I have a lot of nice matchups from other players, it affords me the ability to kind of take a chance and move him to the bench this week. So yeah, not a spot that I love for AJ Brown, but we'll see what happens. All right, again, we are here with live chat throughout the rest of the show. Any of you viewers, if you're new to the stream or if you're watching on replay, feel free as well to drop us your comments in the section below. But the live chat is open, and we love to hear from you, and we are here to answer your fantasy football questions all show. We'll continue looking at the rundown of games for tomorrow, and the next one we'll talk about is New England at Houston. This is an interesting one to me. The side I'm looking at is the Houston side with Deshaun Watson, Will Fuller. Kind of don't know what exactly to expect here. I'm not necessarily down as much on the Houston passing game as much as I have seen talked about this week. I think New England certainly is what they are on defense, but I don't think that means that you can't get them. New England to the wide receivers, 19th, so certainly in the bottom half. But again, I think that Will Fuller has been so good this year that I feel like he can still have a nice game. Now, we don't know what Stephon Gilmore, if he's back. I think he's expected to be back. So that might change things. See how that plays out. But again, Deshaun Watson, I'll put up the quarterback stats here because we haven't talked much about that. New England, 27th, so 6th fewest fantasy points to the quarterback spot. Remains to be seen what happens with Deshaun Watson there. Is he somebody that you could potentially put on your bench and stream a different quarterback if you like, or go with somebody else? We'll take a look at my list really quick. I know that I have Deshaun Watson in a couple of spots. I don't feel like I want to sit him tomorrow, but in terms of the players that I have as starts, you got, if Bridgewater plays, I think he's a decent play tomorrow. I don't know if I start him over Watson. Tough choice. Kirk Cousins, I think, is a decent play tomorrow. I don't know if I start him over Watson. Same sort of deal. Those are really the only streamers along that line. I mean, you got Tua, you got Dalton. I don't know. I don't know if Watson is the guy that you can sit on your bench. That's a curious play to me. On the New England side, Jacoby Myers, do we see the same kind of production out of him? Houston, let's see where they're at on the list in terms of wide receivers. They are 12th, so they are certainly in the top half. We'll definitely see what happens there. You would think if anybody, it's going to probably be Myers again. Houston has also allowed plenty of points to the running game. They are second most fantasy points to running backs, and Sony Michel is back or expected to be back tomorrow. So I've seen a lot of talk about Damian Harris this week. I don't love the play on Harris anymore because of Michel. I think if they're bringing him back, why else would they bring him back if they didn't intend to play him? So I think that's more likely going to be what's going to happen with that game tomorrow. Again, we'll play it out. For me, as I've said many times on this stream, we are Bills Mafia up here in Buffalo. So New England game, with the exception of checking in to see how my fantasy players are doing for Houston. I don't know that I'll be watching this game all that much, but that's just me. But no, and again, fantasy football is different, and I try to separate that from rooting interest. But we'll just see what happens. You never know with these games. It's fantasy football. Week 11. We love it. All right, those are all the 1 o'clock games. The next game's up in the 4 o'clock window. We got Miami at Denver. Kind of interesting to see exactly what happens here. Ahmed in the backfield for Miami going up against the Broncos. The Denver Broncos running backs, they are allowing, where are they? 14th most fantasy points to the running back spot. On the other side of things, Miami is allowing, they've been tough on D, obviously, this year. Where do I see them? Do I see them? They are 13th, so right around the same area. Probably be Melvin Gordon, although Phillip Lindsay may get some play there as well. I don't know. This is like a game for me. Like I know there's been a lot of talk about Miami this week that they've improved as a team. For fantasy purposes, this is kind of like I don't know how much. Certainly there are players worth watching there. Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant. I don't remember if Noah Fant might have some more injury concerns for tomorrow. There are players worth watching there, but I think that might not necessarily be the one that I have on the Sunday ticket up to watch tomorrow. And the next game, another game that I don't know how much I'll watch, is the Jets at the Chargers. I'll watch because of the fact that I have Justin Herbert in a lot of spots this year, and I like the matchup a lot. For the Chargers side of things, obviously the Flying Adam Gases, they are who they are. But if you are someone who rosters Keenan Allen or perhaps is thinking about playing Mike Williams tomorrow, the New York Jets, there you see, allowing the 10th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. I think both of these players are certainly in play tomorrow. In addition, I like Hunter Henry quite a bit, the tight end spot. The Jets are, again, 10th most to the tight ends. I actually, on my starts and sits tomorrow, quick preview, I will have Hunter Henry as my top start for tight ends tomorrow. And again, starts and sits, obviously not talking about your auto starts like a Travis Kelce or whatnot, but I like Hunter Henry a lot there. And again, at the running back spot, I think Kalen Ballage is just fine for the Chargers. The Jets, there you see, allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the running backs. You have to expect that they will probably not be all that competitive in this game. The Chargers may end up with a lead there and just kind of turn to Ballage. You have to think he gets the goal line touches there as well. Still no Austin Eckler yet. So, yeah, I see no reason to worry if you are thinking about playing him tomorrow. I think it's a fine play. Next game up is Green Bay at Indianapolis. Another interesting one here. Lots of storylines in this game. Green Bay with the passing game going up against Indy's tough D. I mean, who do you like more? Has Indy's D proven itself against enough tough teams? And has Green Bay's offense proven itself against enough tough teams this year? If you take a look at, if you're talking about Devontae Adams or perhaps Alan Lazard returning tomorrow for the Packers, Indianapolis currently allowing the 26th, so that is the 7th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Be interesting to see what happens there. And on the flip side of things, I don't know that there's an Indy wide receiver that you're necessarily pointing to, but you're looking at the running back side of things for the Colts, and Green Bay allows the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back position. So again, this is why I think Nyheim Hines is a nice play tomorrow. The only kind of, not uncertainty you have here is whether or not, who gets the bulk of that volume. Again, obviously, if I like Hines, then I obviously feel that the best chance is that he gets that bulk of the volume. And if you're in need of a player tomorrow, I think you can take that chance and see what you get from him in this game. Again, I don't know. Hard to say. I don't have that much of a feel on whether or not this turns out to be a high-scoring game or not. I feel more that this turns into a lower-scoring game for some reason. I don't know. It's just my gut feeling that Indy's D kind of keeps it low. Obviously, Green Bay has the potential to put up the points. You wouldn't think that Indy, would be kind of running it up. So I don't know. I just, feel like every Chicago Bears game that you watch this year has just been that grinded out game. I don't know if it gets to that point, but I feel like it could. Interesting to see. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I have Phillip Rivers as a sit tomorrow from the quarterback standpoint. I think Aaron Rodgers will be fine. I don't have him as a start, but I don't have him as a sit either. Yeah, we'll see what happens in this game. It's what wins out here is which one of these two teams hasn't proven themselves yet. Indy's D against a nice, powerful offense, or Green Bay's offense against a powerful defense. All right, next game up is Dallas and Minnesota. That's also a 4:00 game, and that game is in Minnesota. I get this feeling that Dallas's defense, for whatever reason, as bad as they've kind of been all year, I'm not going to say that they're going to be great, but I get the feeling that they've started to turn the corner a little bit. Perhaps they at least slow down some teams that they're playing against. Who knows? Tomorrow, Minnesota, it's Kirk Cousins. In terms of the wide receivers, Dallas currently allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. So you're talking about Thielen and Jefferson. I think there's probably plenty for both of them. Of the two, I probably like Thielen better tomorrow. And on the other side of things, for Dallas, Minnesota, again, they're allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. So I think Amari Cooper will be just fine. I think CeeDee Lamb will be okay. I even think that Dalton Schultz may be okay in this game, all considering that Andy Dalton is back. It's hard to say with Michael Gallup. We just haven't really seen a lot of games to know exactly what Dalton's going to do or who he's going to like to go to back there. But you would think, if anything, now obviously you still got Dalvin Cook for the Vikings to run it up. So perhaps that the fact that Dallas is fairly bad means that the potential for the wide receivers is down a little bit, because you would expect that Cook has a nice day and takes a lot of that production himself. Hard to say what happens there. I would think that this is at least a reasonably good scoring game. I wouldn't expect this to be a rough one where nobody's scoring any touchdowns. I would think you're going to see some on both sides. So we'll see how that one plays out. But a lot of fantasy players in this one. This is a good one to watch on the Sunday Ticket tomorrow. The Sunday night football game is Kansas City at Las Vegas. Obviously, the Raiders won that first game. We had a big Josh Jacobs game and a very nice Derek Carr game. This is an 8:20 start on the East Coast. Kansas City and Vegas, the players that you're talking about, we don't know for sure about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He has been missing some practices with illness so far this week. Not sure I don't know if I've seen a report either way since those early reports came out. So that is something to keep an eye on. On the Vegas side of things, I think you're looking at Josh Jacobs to have another nice game. Kansas City has been not great against the run. We put up the stats. They are 10th most fantasy points to the running back spot. So I think if you have Josh Jacobs here, you love it. I foolishly sat Josh Jacobs in their first matchup this year, thinking that, perhaps Kansas City would get out to a lead and game script would force them not to run the ball quite as much. And Jacobs not being a guy that necessarily always gets the volume as a pass catcher back there. I sat him on the bench and watched him crush him, and that was sad. So I'm not planning on doing that again in this game. I think I'm firing him up. I would expect everyone else is too. On the flip side of things, Vegas, in terms of running back position, they are 5th most fantasy points to running backs. So if for some reason Clyde Edwards-Helaire doesn't play tomorrow, is Le'Veon Bell playable? This is a great question to me. He hasn't been very playable for much of this year when he's even been healthy, but I can definitely say that in one of my leagues, I saw him sitting there on the waiver wire, and I said, let's get him. Why not? See what happens. And this is the spot where it would be if for some reason CEH doesn't play. So, is Le'Veon Bell a possibility tomorrow? Who knows? Sammy Watkins is out tomorrow. Perhaps a lot of people might have thought they could turn to him this week. And again, Sammy Watkins often with the injury problems. He will not be there. Las Vegas currently allowing the 16th, so they are right in the middle, 2 wide receivers. And again, Kansas City, a little bit tougher, the 5th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. I don't know that there is anybody that I feel like is a good receiver start for Vegas. Obviously, Darren Waller is the guy there who you are auto starting. And in terms of points to tight ends, Kansas City allowing 26th. So that is the 7th fewest. Waller did have a nice game in their first matchup this year, so I don't feel as bad about potentially playing him in that spot. And then the Monday night game is the LA Rams at the Tampa Bay Bucks, 8:15 on the East Coast Monday night. 2 tough defenses. I have both of these quarterbacks as sits this week. I will have that on tomorrow's start sit lists. I don't like Goff or Brady. I certainly think that Brady, always has the potential to play well, but in terms of purely looking at the matchup, there you see at the bottom, the LA Rams, the 2nd fewest fantasy points to the quarterback spot. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a little bit higher, but still in the red, the 9th fewest fantasy points to the quarterback spot. Jared Goff has been just all year long. So therefore, I don't really necessarily like either of them. And what does that mean in terms of the wide receivers that we talk about? Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. Tampa Bay currently allowing 25th. So that is the 8th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. I mentioned this on the waiver wire video that I did this week. The Rams are so confusing to me. I don't understand playing the Seattle Seahawks last week why Josh Reynolds ends up as your most productive receiver. When you have Kupp and Woods, you would expect one of those 2 guys to be there. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I just don't get it. Jared Goff did not have a touchdown. Let me double check that to make sure I'm not saying the wrong thing. He did not have a touchdown last week against Seattle. I mean, Seattle's given up like 84 touchdowns to every quarterback they played this year, right? What's going on? What is the deal with I just don't get it. So yeah, it's frustrating. Like, how do you know what to trust here? And on the other side of things, like, I don't love Mike Evans. I don't love Chris Godwin's game, like value potential tomorrow. I don't love Antonio. I don't know what I love in this game at this point because the Rams are the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. You see it there, 32nd. What do you do with this game? Just sit everybody. I mean, I guess is there a potential for someone to get it going on the ground? Tampa Bay, 6th fewest. This committee backfield in LA. The Rams. Here is your spot where you could have some potential. Where are the Rams are 28th. I see them right there, 5th fewest. So perhaps this is a a 6-2 final score? I mean, that's what it sounds like from what I'm talking about at this point. I have no idea. Fantasy-wise, if you have better options than any of these players, like this is, I don't know. If you have the LA Rams or the Tampa Bay Bucks defenses, perhaps those are your most productive. That's your most value in that game. I don't know where else to look on that one. That's just a weird one to me. So, but that's your Monday night game. We'll see what happens. At any rate, that's the rundown of all the games. Let's put up another promo here for you guys. We had a little more content to go through tonight while we're on the air with you. I've been here for a little over an hour tonight. So we are TFF Live. Tonight is our Saturday Stars show, but tomorrow is our main show. It's the Sunday pregame show, and that is streaming live right here on our YouTube channel every Sunday at 12 noon. We're with you right up until game time every week, answering all your fantasy football questions and getting you ready for your matchups each week. And then let's put up our other information here, and that is about us. We are the Fantasy Follow. We are brand new this year here on YouTube. So if you are watching with us live, if you're a first-time viewer or a return viewer, or if you're watching us on replay, we appreciate you finding us. We know as a new channel, we don't necessarily come up quite as high on searches, so it might have taken you a little work to find us. But by all means, now that you're here, make sure and click that subscribe button so you can get those notifications whenever we have new content. We want to make sure that you guys are able to find us. And then also we are on Twitter, and that is at the Fantasy Follow. Fantasy spelled FNTSY. That's simply because the other spelling it out was too long for Twitter, and they didn't like us when we tried to do that. So, but again, you can send us your fantasy football questions during the week on Twitter using the hashtag AskTFFLive, and we will answer those questions live on our Sunday pregame show. Facebook / The Fantasy Follow, and our website, thefantasyfollow.com. All right, again, the live chat is open. We're with you for a little bit while more tonight. We will go through some of the rest of our information for you, and if you have any fantasy football questions, jump in the chat by all means. We will get to those right away. That's what we're here for, and that is what we like to do. In the meantime, let's get you to the title of our show is Saturday Stars, and what that is taking a look at the top matchup plays for tomorrow's Week 11 of fantasy football. Again, these are not necessarily starts and sits. These are not ranked in any order. This is just taking a look at the top players that you would expect to return some nice fantasy value in their matchups tomorrow. And starting at the quarterback position, and I believe Ben Roethlisberger is in line for a nice day tomorrow, playing at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville allowing the third most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. They have allowed 24 or more fantasy points to 6 quarterbacks this year and have given up 300 or more passing yards 5 times. Roethlisberger, the last 2 games, 25-plus fantasy points, and has had 2 or more touchdowns all but 1 game this season. Again, I think that Pittsburgh has shown that they want to pass the ball. For whatever reason, James Conner has not been as involved, and so even though Jacksonville provides a nice matchup, to the running back position tomorrow, Conner is questionable, not questionable because that sounds like that's his status for the game. He is more of a question mark to me in terms of, if you have a player, if you have enough depth at the running back spot, can you sit James Conner and, perhaps you have a couple of nice starters and you've picked up someone along the way like a Mike Davis or a J.D. McKissick. Do you feel like putting him in over a James Conner? I don't know. I'm curious about why things have gone the way they've gone the past few weeks in Pittsburgh. Nonetheless, that bodes well again for the passing game, and that means Roethlisberger is a nice play. Perhaps if you need a streamer, perhaps you have Buffalo Bills Josh Allen as your starter, or Ben Roethlisberger is a nice player to get in there in place of him. I like him overall tomorrow as a nice play, and I think he definitely is one of the top matchups at the quarterback spot. Next guy I have on the list here, it's Justin Herbert from the LA Chargers, playing versus the New York Jets. That is a home game in Los Angeles, and New York allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. It has been a nice season for the rookie Herbert, 21 or more fantasy points now in 6 straight games. I actually have Herbert in a few spots, but funny enough, I have Herbert and Roethlisberger both in one league, and I have mulled it over a couple of times on making that switch. Herbert's been the guy that I've leaned on ever since picking him up. There probably is an argument to playing Roethlisberger tomorrow, given the fact that in both of these matchups, you expect Pittsburgh and Los Angeles to play with the lead. And realistically, I think that the Chargers are much more likely to turn to the run once they've established that lead than Pittsburgh is. And therefore, does that mean that the potential day for Herbert could be a little bit less? I can't, by any means, expect the Jets to stay with the Chargers tomorrow. I believe Joe Flacco is starting again. I think, James Crowder is going to be one of my sits tomorrow. I just can't imagine that the Jets are in this game. I guess there's an argument there between those two players. But nonetheless, in terms of just looking at Herbert, again, 21 or more, 6 straight, and he's had 2 or more touchdowns in all those games. The Jets have allowed 24 or more fantasy points to 4 quarterbacks this year, and they're giving up the 4th most passing yards in the league. So what I'm hoping for is Herbert comes out and throws like 5 touchdowns in the first half and then shuts it down. I'll be good with that. Some of them to Keenan Allen, I'll be good with that. But again, I think Herbert is a very nice play tomorrow. Certainly one of the top matchups at the quarterback spot for Week 11. All right, let's talk a little bit about wide receivers for tomorrow. Adam Thielen is the guy that I have on the list. Now, again, Adam Thielen, you might say, well, Joe, he's an auto start. Like, why are we talking about him? Well, the reason why is because last week on the Sunday pregame show, I made Adam Thielen my top sit, playing against the Chicago Bears, a very tough matchup. So I thought it was only fair now that I bring him back now and include him in the top matchups this week, playing against the Cowboys, who are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Last week, Thielen, 20.3 fantasy points against the Bears, 2 touchdowns. Certainly a nice game in a very tough matchup. So we like that a lot for Thielen. Don't know what happens this week. If Dalvin Cook, comes in and leads the way, and that means less for potentially for the receivers there. But nonetheless, looking at the Dallas side of things, they have allowed 16 or more fantasy points to 12 different wide receivers this year. That is a lot. And considering that we're going into Week 11, that's a lot. 100 or more yards, 5 times they've given up. And again, I did a double take on this one, and still looking at my notes, questioned myself whether or not I wrote this down correctly, but I certainly checked it again. I looked up and found the 11th fewest passing yards allowed. If for some reason I got that wrong, it still doesn't sound right to me, but if that's the case, given the fact that they're allowing the 3rd most fantasy points, that simply means they're giving up all the touchdowns to wide receivers, regardless of how many yards are behind that. Either way, I like Adam Thielen. I like him a little bit better over Justin Jefferson tomorrow. I think if Cook does have another big day, perhaps Thielen still gets his, and that turns into a little bit lesser of a day for Justin Jefferson. We have seen him get a little bit fewer targets on some of those big Dalvin Cook days. So I do like Adam Thielen as a Saturday star top matchup for tomorrow's Week 11, the wide receiver spot. Next guy on the list here, I've got Amari Cooper from the Dallas Cowboys. Again, you might say, Amari Cooper, wait, he's a big name. Like, why are we talking about him? Like, if you have him, you're starting him. Well, I don't know that's necessarily the case at this point. Certainly, there's a lot of hesitancy. Is that a word? You can be very hesitant. If hesitancy is a word, if it's not, I just made it up. But either way, you could be very hesitant about Amari Cooper right now, given the quarterback situation in Dallas. We really don't know what's going to happen there. But again, this matchup carries the day, playing the Vikings, allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. They have given up 22 or more fantasy points 5 times this year, allowing the 6th most passing yards in the league. Cooper has not had a touchdown since Week 6. I mean, he's the guy there. I mean, certainly Gallup and Lamb could have nice games, but I think, Cooper has to see action there. I don't see any way around that. I do think that he breaks that streak and finds the end zone tomorrow. I think he's going to be, you may not necessarily expect a huge blow-up game out of him, but I think he's going to be fine. I don't think he's a guy where you have to say, well, I can't start Amari Cooper tomorrow. I think he's going to be fine. I think the matchup carries the day. So I got Amari Cooper as a Saturday star, top matchup for Week 11. Next guy I like a lot here is Terry McLaurin for the Washington football team. They are playing against the Cincinnati Bengals. That is a home game tomorrow. McLaurin against the Bengals. The Bengals allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. They have given up 17 or more fantasy points every week of the season except for Week 1. And last week against Pittsburgh, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, all 21 or more fantasy points in that game. They're allowing the 7th most passing yards in the league. I think McLaurin is going to be in line for a great day tomorrow, and I don't even necessarily think that he's the only receiver that will have a nice day in this game. I also think that if you want to talk about J.D. McKissick in terms of the pass catching he does, I think that's certainly in play for this game as well. I don't hesitate at all with starting Terry McLaurin. I think he is a Saturday star, top matchup tomorrow for Week 11. And then another guy at that wide receiver spot, it's Chase Claypool. Again, I think Pittsburgh tomorrow playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think it's pedal to the metal. I don't expect them to let up with the passing game here, and Claypool certainly has been a benefactor. He has averaged over 10 targets the last 3 games and has had 3 touchdowns in those 3. Jacksonville allowing the 9th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. They've given up 16 or more fantasy points 6 times in the last 3 games. They've given up 5 100-yard wide receivers in the last 5 games, and currently they're allowing the 3rd most passing yards in the league. I think there's plenty to go around for Deontay Johnson, for Juju. I just happen to pick Chase Claypool as the guy that I like the best here. Obviously, it could go any direction with that roster. There's plenty of talent there, as there seems to always be in Pittsburgh. But I've got Chase Claypool as a top matchup for tomorrow, Saturday star. All right, before we get into the rest, let's go ahead and get a little quick comment up here. Just remind everybody that the live chat is open. If you have fantasy football questions, you can go ahead and jump in the chat. Drop us those questions, even if we are talking about something else. When we have chat, we will get back to those. That's what we love to do. So by all means, we are here for a little while longer tonight. We'll go through the rest of our Saturday stars and probably call it a night there. But if you are on the stream, if you're watching live, feel free to jump in the chat. If you're watching on replay, by all means, feel free to drop us a comment below. Let us know if you got any players that you feel like should be on these lists, or how you feel about starting any of these guys in their matchups that they've got tomorrow. All right, let's take a look at some more Saturday stars. Moving over to the running back spot, and I've got Mike Davis as a top matchup for tomorrow, playing, again, this graphic, it says at Detroit. That game is actually in Carolina. That is a home game for the Carolina Panthers. Try to type the correct information on these graphics from time to time. You never know. Sometimes I screw it up, but it happens. At any rate, Mike Davis for the Panthers. The Lions allowing the most fantasy points to the running back spot this season. They have given up 17 or more fantasy points 6 times in the last 4 games. That's right, 6 times in the last 4 games. That's more than once per game. That means they're not doing well, and that means a nice day for Mike Davis, you would expect. 3 rushing touchdowns last week to Washington that the Lions gave up. The combination of Gibson and McKissick, I believe it was 2 to Gibson, 1 to McKissick. And they are currently allowing the 3rd most rushing yards in the league. Davis has had some nice games and a few down games towards the end of this run here when he was filling in for McCaffrey and also kind of spelling him a little bit when McCaffrey was on his way back. However, I did write down this note that Mike Davis has the 2nd most receptions among all running backs this year, second only to Alvin Kamara. So certainly you would expect him to be the guy there in terms of both rushing the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield. I expect him to be in line for a potentially very nice day tomorrow against the Detroit Lions. That is Mike Davis, a Saturday star, top matchup for Week 11. Next guy I've got on the list, we talked about him a little bit already tonight. It's Nyheim Hines for the Indianapolis Colts. Again, the situation in Indianapolis, Jordan Wilkins, Jonathan Taylor. You've obviously got all those guys in the backfield. So it becomes a little bit of a guess in terms of who actually gets the production there. But we have some information to go on that I feel like leans this towards Hines enough to make him startable tomorrow. I don't feel like this is an LA Rams or a Baltimore Ravens backfield situation where they just seem to make it up on the fly. You know, I feel like Jonathan Taylor was their guy, and somewhere along the way, they've decided not to go to him as much. And I don't think that Jordan Wilkins rates above either of these guys. While he may get some action, to me, it's either Taylor or Hines. I could be wrong. I'm wrong plenty of times, but hopefully I try to be right sometimes too, especially when it's situations where I have Nyheim Hines and I'm going to play him in the spot where I have him tomorrow. But I think he's very startable. Certainly the matchup is there, playing against the Green Bay Packers, allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back spot. They've given up 15 or more fantasy points 6 times in the last 7 games. And they've given up 26 or more fantasy points twice in the last 5 games. Again, their stats say the 12th fewest rushing yards allowed in the league, but the 3rd most fantasy points, which basically, unless I've written down the wrong information, that means that they are giving up all sorts of touchdowns. It's not the rushing yards that are carrying those numbers. It's the touchdowns. And Hines, 21 or more fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 games. Again, if you're looking at game script, you expect that Hines has more potential for value if they're playing from behind. I certainly think, although I feel like this is a difficult matchup to predict, I certainly think there are chances and there are arguments to be made that Green Bay plays this game with the lead and that Indy has to throw the ball trying to come back from behind. So if that is the case, it certainly means even better for Hines than if not. That's what you look for here. Hard to predict that, especially in this matchup that I feel is just kind of up in the air. But I do think Hines is definitely startable, so I have him as a Saturday Star top matchup for Week 11. All right, a couple more guys at the running back spot. I've got Adrian Peterson for the Detroit Lions playing at the Carolina Panthers. Now, the situation in Detroit, there is no DeAndre Swift tomorrow. He is in concussion protocol. So you've got Peterson, you've got Kerryon Johnson. I think of those two, Peterson does get the bulk of the work. I'm sure that they will work Johnson in as well. But again, Carolina allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the running back spot. They have allowed 24 or more fantasy points to 5 different running backs this year. And again, last week it was Ronald Jones with 192 yards rushing. Certainly Peterson, his volume has been down as they've turned more to Swift. He has had less than 10 rushes now in 3 straight weeks. But that situation obviously changes now without Swift in the lineup tomorrow. And I do think that between Peterson and Johnson, I think Peterson gets the nod there. I think he's certainly a very worthy starter and certainly based on his matchup, a top one for tomorrow. And again, Saturday Star for Week 11. All right, and the next running back I have on the list here is Kalen Ballage for the LA Chargers playing against the New York Jets. This game, again, is in Los Angeles, and New York is allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the running back spot. I do think that this is a game where the Jets are down big time, and certainly LA turns to the run at that point and definitely or necessarily doesn't throw it around quite as much. Again, I don't think that Joshua Kelly is a concern there. While he may get some work, I think that Ballage is the guy there, up until the time that Austin Eckler is back in that lineup. I certainly think for sure he has the goal line touches. Again, Kelly only 23 rushes over the course of the last 3 games. And looking at the Jets, they've allowed 13 or more fantasy points. 7 times this year they have, and they're giving up the 13th most rushing yards in the league. So pretty much the Jets are giving up to just about everywhere. And, again, game script leads you to believe that Ballage is in line for a nice volume of work tomorrow. And that's why I've got him as a Saturday Star top matchup for Week 11. All right, just a couple more guys. Again, if you got any chat questions, feel free to jump in the chat. We're here for just a little while longer. We'll go through the rest of our names on the list, and then we'll probably call it a night for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with the Sunday pregame show at noon. So let's take a look at the rest of the names we have to look at tonight. And this is at the tight end spot. First name I've got here is Logan Thomas from the Washington football team, playing the Cincinnati Bengals tomorrow. That game is in Washington. And Cincinnati allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to the tight end spot. They've allowed 10 or more to 6 tight ends this year. 10 or more fantasy points, that is. And Thomas, we've talked about him a lot this year. He's been that guy that's kind of been just like wavering. Like, is he going to break through? Is he going to be good? Is he not? I think steadier quarterback play certainly helps him. I expect that with Smith. Let's hope, again, Alex Smith, it's nice to see him back after that awful injury that he had. Let's hope things can continue to go well for him. Thomas last week against Detroit, 10.6 fantasy points. He's actually had 10 or more fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. Again, it's PPR format, but certainly a tight end spot. If you can get 10, you probably take it at this point, unless you have one of those top guys, and one of those top guys is out hurt for the rest of the year. So it makes it tough. So again, Logan Thomas, I like him as a Saturday Star top matchup at the tight end spot. Good chance to return you some value in Week 11 in that matchup tomorrow. Next guy I've got on the list as a top matchup, it's Eric Ebron. Again, these aren't starts and sits necessarily, not ranked in any order. These are just guys that you can expect to have nice matchups tomorrow. I've got Eric Ebron for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, similar situation to the wide receivers in Pittsburgh. I think they're going to continue to throw the ball. Ebron has certainly gotten plenty of work. We talked about him a lot in the past few weeks, even before he had a nice run of matchups starting as a waiver wire pickup. He has actually averaged over 6 targets now for the last 4 games in a row, and he's had 2 touchdowns overall in those 4 games. If he had 2 touchdowns in all 4 of them, he'd be like the top tight end of the year at this point. But at any rate, Jacksonville has given up 7 touchdowns to tight ends overall this year. I think this is a great spot. Again, I think if you're streaming tight ends or if you're looking for somebody that you need, I think Ebron is certainly a worthy player to get in your lineup. I like him as a Saturday Star top matchup for Week 11. And let me just jump over here and see. Looks like we might have a chat here that I can get to here. All right. We got a chat from TS. Thank you, TS, for the chat. I do think that you look familiar from previous streams. So if you are back again, glad to have you back. If you're not, if you're a new viewer, glad to have you with us. And you asked Brady or Matt Ryan, talking about quarterback options for tomorrow. All right, so here's what we will do. Let's take a look at matchups and fantasy points allowed to the quarterback spot. This is obviously Brady in the Monday night game, and Matt Ryan plays at 1 o'clock. So we'll talk about Ryan playing against New Orleans. New Orleans giving up the 19th most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. And then Brady playing the Rams. The Rams are 31st, so second fewest fantasy points to the quarterback spot. I actually have Tom Brady as a sit tomorrow on the Sunday pregame show. When I have my starts and sits, I'll have him as a top 5 sit. Now, I'm going to say this. Anytime you make Brady a sit, I mean, it's kind of like one of those where you feel like you're just kind of like on the edge. It's like not the most confident play. And I would say that's probably the same situation here. However, just looking strictly at the matchup, this is a tough matchup. And Ryan, certainly, while it's not one of the top ones, I mean, he's not playing a team that you see in green. I still think that, Atlanta, Calvin really expected to be back in the fold tomorrow. Julio Jones, I think Hayden Hurst has a nice day. I think Atlanta continues to pass the ball a ton, and partly because Atlanta playing against New Orleans, if you go over to the running back side of this matchup, New Orleans allowing the fewest fantasy points to running backs. So when you look at those 2 factors combined, that makes it a passing game to me for Atlanta. I think the volume will be there. I think Brady, it's a little bit more of an uphill battle. I do think that, perhaps that LA Rams defense does kind of clamp down on Tampa Bay. I know I heard a stat that Aaron Donald, I think, has never sacked Tom Brady. Don't quote me if I'm wrong on that. I think that will change in that Monday night game. And I do think that, the Rams, even though, you talk a lot about their defense, I think they are good, across the board. I do not think that it's just Jalen Ramsey in that secondary that's stopping players. I don't think it's the situation where you're locking down one receiver and the other guys necessarily have a better matchup. So I guess the bottom line, TS, to what I'm saying here is of these 2 players, I think Matt Ryan is the one that I would pick here. But again, as with any of these, what I like to do is try to give you as much information to back up my opinion as possible. But I always say, your roster better than anybody. By all means, go with your gut. But I will throw you my input. And I think Matt Ryan there between the 2, simply because that matchup is a tough one for Brady. I'm not going to say that he can't have a nice game, but I think the pathway is a little bit better there for Ryan to have a nice game. In this one between those 2, I think that Matt Ryan it would certainly be a fine start there. And again, TS, thank you for being with us on the live stream, and we're glad to have you here. And by all means, like I said, I do think that you are a regular that's been with us before, but if you're not, and if any of you also are out there watching for the first time, by all means, make sure and hit that subscribe button, because as I've said a few times, we are a brand new channel. We don't always come up that high in the searches. So we know that you guys that have found us might have had to work a little bit to do that. We want you to definitely get those notifications so that when we have new content going forward. And again, thank you, TS, for being with us in the chat. I will put up the notification here about our live chat. We keep our live chat open for the rest of our show. Got a little bit of content left to go through, but if you guys are out there on the stream, if you got more questions, jump in and I'll stay with you guys. By all means, that's just what we're here for. This is what we love to do. We like talking fantasy football. So if you got questions or anything that you want to chat about, by all means, jump in that chat. And we got a couple more players to go through in terms of our Saturday stars in the top matchups for Week 11 of fantasy football. And the next guy I'll talk about, again, it's symmetry, falls right in line with that question about Matt Ryan. And it's Hayden Hurst, the tight end for the Atlanta Falcons, and they are playing at the New Orleans Saints. That is a 1 p.m. game in the early window tomorrow. The Saints allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the tight end position this year. They have given up 10 or more fantasy points to 6 tight ends. And then Hayden Hurst has had 10 or more fantasy points now in 4 straight games, and also 50 or more yards in those 4 games. So again, if you're looking for a tight end, obviously it's tough. Hayden Hurst is there. I like him as a play tomorrow. Again, I think this is a potential to be possibly a higher scoring side game. I don't want to say for sure because a lot of it depends on how the Taysom Hill experiment works out. But I do like Hayden Hurst as a play tomorrow at the tight end spot. So I've got him as a Saturday Star top matchup for week 11. And let me jump back over in here into the chat here. And I see a follow from TS that says, thank you. Yes, I've been here before. Awesome. Glad to have you back. Hey, all you guys that are back to join us, we appreciate it. And I love to hear that. That is one of the best things about doing these is to be able to kind of talk to the same people and kind of, follow along with. It's interesting because, when I end up watching these games on Sunday, obviously I have my own fantasy players to keep an eye on, but all these matchups and all these decisions that we talk about, I find myself flipping through Sunday Ticket and checking on different players because of what did I say? Did I give you good info? I hope so. But I find myself flipping through and seeing and celebrating touchdowns when it's not guys that are on my teams, based on the different choices that we have to make. All right, see a follow up here again. Sit 1 PPR. Interesting. Sit 1. Godwin, Ridley, Deontay, Brandon Cooks. Sit 1. Well, let's take a look at matchups. Let me get some matchups up on the screen. Will help us out with that. I know what my gut says already, but let's go to the matchups and take a look. So fantasy points to the wide receiver position. All right, so Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin playing the Rams. The Rams allowing the fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position. You see that on the left side of your screen. And again, I have to say, brand new graphics for tonight's show, this rundown of these, so I hope you guys like them. Calvin Ridley playing for Atlanta. New Orleans allowing, let's see, in the middle of the pack somewhere, 14th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot, so right in the middle. Deontay Johnson for Pittsburgh. They are playing at Jacksonville. Jacksonville currently allowing the 9th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. And Brandon Cooks for Houston. Cooks, they are playing New England. That's a 1 o'clock game, and New England is a little bit farther down. 19th fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. So based on matchups, I would not sit Deontay Johnson. I think Pittsburgh is going to throw it all over the place against Jacksonville, and Jacksonville's leaking points there. I think Johnson is a fine play tomorrow. I think Calvin Ridley is back in the fold. They've had their bye week. I would be surprised. I mean, it's not like he's coming back a week after an injury. He's had that week off. So I would be surprised if this turns out to be one of I hope it's not the case because I certainly have him as well in some spots. I don't want to see him, start the game and then not finish it. I hope that's not the case. So to me, it comes down to Godwin and Cooks. Again, Tampa Bay playing the Rams. The Rams are obviously, you see them on the left side of the screen, the fewest fantasy points. New England up at 19th. Here's the difference. I feel like this is tough. This is close because of this. We always expect Bill Belichick to shut down your main option, okay? And if that's the case, and if it's Stephon Gilmore and he's back and they shut down Will Fuller, then where do they go next? And it could potentially be Brandon Cooks. In terms of Tampa Bay, there are a lot of mouths to feed. However, if you had to ask me my gut, like which one of the guys in Tampa Bay is the first one that gets it, if any of them has a nice day, it's Chris Godwin. I'm not really comfortable with Mike Evans, and I don't know about Antonio Brown, being that it's still relatively early in his time there. So I think out of those guys, potentially it's Godwin that still has a decent day. However, it's the worst matchup you could possibly have, as you can see. So, yeah, it comes down to if you're going to sit one of those two, I definitely think it's between Godwin and Cooks. I guess if it were me, that's a tough one. I would probably sit Cooks just because I think, for one, Godwin, like I said, is probably the more of the main guy there. And also, if you look at it this way, Godwin's the guy you drafted relatively high in your draft. There's a decent chance that you didn't even have Cooks when the year started and you picked him up off a waiver wire because he got off to such a rough start. And again, I don't think that weather has any influence there because that game is in Houston and the other one is in Tampa Bay. There are a couple of weather games tomorrow, especially in Cleveland, where that comes into play. But yeah, I think if it were me, again, I always say this, trust your gut. You know your roster better than anybody, but I'm going to say that Brandon Cooks is the sit here. For sure, Ridley and Deontay are starts. I think it's close, but I'll pick Cooks And I will say whichever way you go, as I always say, I hope your guy crushes it, and I hope the other guy doesn't. So I will absolutely wish you good with that. And thank you again, TS, for being here with us. We appreciate you being back on the stream again. All right, we got a new chat here from, first let me get the wide receiver info off the screen, and let's get to the next chat that we have. And this one is from Colton Cash. And Colton, thank you for being with us in the stream. You look like you might be a new viewer, so appreciate you finding us. You asked Cam Newton or Carson Wentz. I will say this, I have been down on Carson Wentz all year, although he has had some good games. Cam Newton has also been a little bit shaky from time to time. But I don't know how, to me, it's difficult trusting Wentz at this point. Obviously, he does have some of his players back in the fold, some of his receivers back, Jalen Reagor, Alshon Jeffrey. We expect at some point we would think Dallas Goedert is actually going to have a nice game. Who knows when that happens? But when you compare these two, if you were just going based on how I feel about how they've played this year, on that alone, I like the Newton side. Let's take a look at the matchups. On the left side of your screen, you will see the matchups, and we're talking about Philadelphia playing at Cleveland and New England playing at Houston. We'll start with the New England side. So Houston Texans currently allowing, let's see here, to the quarterback spot. Where are they? Houston 17th. So right in the middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points allowed to the quarterback spot. In terms of Philadelphia, Cleveland is at 11th. So they've allowed more points. Here's the difference. They're expecting bad weather in Cleveland. So if you remember the weather issues that have been there and what that did in that Houston game, for sure, if you are thinking about playing Wentz, keep an eye on that weather situation for tomorrow. That is going to, if it's what I've seen was 70% chance of rain. Again, I'm in Buffalo. The weather hasn't been great here either. I'm not that far from Cleveland. Keep an eye on that, in terms of when you make that decision. I think if it were me, I like Cam of these two, just because I've felt, very skeptical about Wentz the entire year. Yes, he has had some nice games, but to me, it's been difficult to predict. And also that offensive line has not provided great protection for him all year long. So yeah, I think I like Newton. Now I see Jay Postman. I see you say Wentz here for sure. So you've got a different opinion here. I'll put some of the follow-ups here because I do like the different opinions. Cam can't even hit 200 yards most games. And then Cam is going to run all over Houston defense. So it's kind of a couple. I'll put this next one up. Doubtful defense is garbage, but Cam is just flat bad. So some different opinions here. I'll go back to the original one. I want to take a look back over on this side of things and just let me take a look at the past couple of outputs from these two and get a little bit more information to go with my thoughts. So let's call up New England first, and let me see what Cam has had. I do expect Cam to have a better game in this upcoming game than he's potentially been playing recently. So the last couple of games, now I'm looking at a half-point PPR screen. So let's look at the last 4 games for Cam. Half-point PPR, 2.82 in Week 7, 18.36 in Week 8, 24.56 in Week 9, 16.82 in Week 10. And those opponents were San Francisco, Buffalo, the Jets, and then Baltimore. He did have one game, 274 yards passing in there, only 1 passing touchdown, but for sure Cam's value is on the ground. Let's take a look at the other side of things with Carson Wentz. And I'll take a look at the last run of games for Wentz. So the last 4 games for Wentz, Week 6 in a half-point PPR scoring format, 29.42, Week 7, 28.76. Week 8, 10.62, and Week 10, 8.72. So again, it's kind of been all over the map with Wentz. That's part of the reason why I don't like him here is because he's been difficult to predict to me. I started the season with Carson Wentz on one of my lineups and dropped him quickly just because I was just frustrated at not knowing when I could play him. Again, similar situation that you're probably in right now, thinking through this. So, it's for sure, if you look at these last 2 games, Week 8 playing Dallas, 10.62 fantasy points against the Cowboys. That's not good. Dallas has given up points to just about everybody this year. The Giants, I feel like a little bit better defense, but again, a bad outing. He has had 2 touchdowns in 3 of those 4 games. And in fact, 4 of the last 5 games, he's had 2 touchdowns. However, during that same stretch, he's had 5 interceptions. My gut here is, again, fantasy football is all about opinions. And by all means, I say this with just about all of these. You know your roster better than anybody. Take a look at that opposing side of your matchup and see if there are any players that impact this decision. Is your opponent playing a Jalen Reagor or a Jacoby Myers perhaps on the New England side? Is there anything that makes that decision kind of come into focus a little bit cleaner? To me, I like Newton of these two. I can certainly see the argument for Wentz as well. But again, as I always say, whichever one of these guys you pick, I hope they crush it for you. But I like Newton out of these two. I'll be watching for sure. And I do see a follow-up. And Colton, you say, is Mark Andrews a must-start since Boyle is out? To me, Mark Andrews is as close to a must-start as you get at the tight end spot every week. If you take a look at there on the left side of your screen, we put up the matchups in terms of fantasy points allowed to tight ends. And let me get back over here and take a look at when they're playing here, when these games are at. Let me just take a look. All right, so the Baltimore game is in the early window, I believe, home against Tennessee. If I have that wrong, don't quote me. Let me get back to the screen so I can be sure and give you the right information. Here it is. Okay, Baltimore, yes, they play at 1 p.m. home against Tennessee. And then we're looking at Baltimore side only. So in terms of Tennessee allows the 14th most, so they're right in the middle in terms of the amount of fantasy points that they allow to the tight end spot. I know it's been a rough season for Baltimore. It's been weird. Like I've had Mark Andrews on my sit list a few times at the tight end spot. I don't this week. I don't necessarily have him on my start list either. But to me, if you have Mark Andrews, you probably draft him in 4th, 5th round in your fantasy draft this year. There are only a few guys that I feel are almost auto starts every week. I would put him in that category. I think for sure Travis Kelce, George Kittle when he was healthy, Darren Waller. I think TJ Hawkinson has thrown himself into that group of players this year. I do think Mark Andrews is amongst those players, even though there's been some struggles, and for sure we've seen some struggles. I don't want to say struggles from Lamar Jackson. It's just that he's been so great in the past, like you expected so much of him. It sometimes has left you wanting a little bit this year. But I'm gonna pull up Mark Andrews' stats just to take a look. Let's see. In the past 4 games, now he's had some not so great fantasy point production games, but in the last 4 games in terms of targets, 4, 6, 5, and then 9. This last game, 9 targets, 7 catches, 61 yards, no touchdowns, and that was at New England. That was in a half-point PPR format. That was 9.60. So if you're playing full PPR, you add another 3.5 to that, and that's 13.1 fantasy points in a PPR format. Certainly above 10 at the tight end spot. You're celebrating any year, it seems like, in fantasy football. Yeah, I think Mark Andrews is in your lineup for sure tomorrow. And if you're still on, Colton, if you're in the chat, hit me up and tell me, like, what are your other options that you're considering playing over Mark Andrews? Because I think there are some players tomorrow that you could at least make an argument for in terms of their matchups. And I think Eric Ebron, Hunter Henry, those types of players are certainly they could be in play. But again, Mark Andrews if it was me, I don't have Mark Andrews on any of my lineups, but if it were me, I would have a hard time sitting him for either one of those guys, Hunter Henry, TJ Hawkinson. Although they've been good, perhaps Hawkinson is the only guy I would say that potentially you could consider starting over Mark Andrews. The matchup would be a little bit better for Hawkinson, playing Carolina, 12th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. But I'm curious, if you're still on, Colton, jump back in the chat and let me know if you have other thoughts of like who your other options are besides Andrews. But I think in terms of just your strict question that you asked there, yeah, I think Mark Andrews is in your lineup. I think you have a hard time sitting him down. And thank you, Colton, for the question. And again, absolutely appreciate you being on the stream and all the viewers. Without you guys, we're sitting here just giving you content, and we'd much rather be chatting back and forth with you. So, and Colton, you say thanks, man. I appreciate the feedback. Again, no, thank you. We love having you guys on. And by all means, like I said, if you're new to the stream, glad you found us. Be sure and click that subscribe button. Make sure you get those notifications whenever we have new content. Like I said, we're a brand new channel, so sometimes a little bit harder to find us. All right, I see a chat here from. Oh, let's get that. Just covers up my graphic just a little bit. Let's get my graphic off the screen. There we go. This is from Trust the Process Football Talk. It says Cam Newton is going to do better. Houston has allowed 24.2 and 41.7 passing yards per game to quarterbacks, most rushing yards per game. I'm projecting to get 180 passing yards, 80 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. I wouldn't disagree with that. Trust the process. I do think that Houston, is certainly vulnerable to the rush. That's partly the reason why, I think if you're gonna have Cam as your starting quarterback, you're expecting him to have a nice day on the ground, and through the air certainly adds to that. Again, to me, Wentz has been unpredictable. But yeah, those are the reasons why. I certainly can see an argument going the other way, and for sure, they both may have nice days. But to me, like the real tipping point on this one is that weather situation in Cleveland tomorrow. It's hard to say at 1:20 at night on the East Coast what's going to happen, 12 hours from now. But if that weather situation is bad in Cleveland, and there's a reasonable chance that it is, then that's all the more reason to it's all more of the roadblock for Carson Wentz tomorrow. And again, that leads me to Cam Newton on that one. So again, thank you, Colton. Thank you, Trust. I don't know. Should I use Trust as the first name? I think that sounds good. Trust the Process Football Talk. Thank you for being with us. Again, if you're new to the stream, appreciate you being here, and would love to have you back here on future shows. And for all of you guys, whether you're new or whether you're returning viewers, by all means, if you haven't done so, like I said before, we want to make sure you get those notifications. Click that subscribe button, and also we do have a goal of 100 new subscribers. So certainly, we appreciate you helping us to reach that goal, and we thank you guys for all being in the chat. We got a couple more. I don't think we went through. I think we have a couple more players that I did not yet go through in terms of Saturday Stars. So we're going to go through a little bit more, stay with you for a little while longer tonight. And again, if you got any more chats, feel free to jump in. Just a couple more players to go through before we wind this down for the night and start to get ready for our show tomorrow. So by all means, jump back in the chat. And let's just see. I got one more comment here. And Trust says, I have my own channel also. Just post my video. Wish you the best of luck with your stream. Awesome. I wish you the best of luck also. Hey, we all love fantasy football talk. That's what we're here for. So, I know that like my local radio station here in Buffalo, WGR, has an afternoon show from 3 to 7 called Show Up on the Bulldog. And Mike Shope is a huge fantasy guy. And I love listening to him. And that's one of the reasons why I started this channel, is because I love listening to fantasy football talk. And I thought that it would be cool to kind of have this channel and be on the other side of it. And hopefully there's a lot of people out there that enjoy listening to it as well. So trust the process. You say, I just reached 100 subscribers. You'll get there in no time. I appreciate it. Yep. It's a learning process. I've been going through the whole process of trying to put good content out there, and hopefully doing some things that you guys like. By all means, that's the bottom line. So, to see all you guys that are return viewers, I certainly appreciate that. Makes me feel good about what we're doing here. And, we'll continue working along and hopefully growing this channel, and, hopefully be able to be with you and work through all that fantasy stuff with you. And, hopefully, like, all you guys that are with us, like, I'm wanting you all to be in the playoffs. Like, I hope we're all in the playoffs. Like, I want to be there too, but I certainly want to see you guys there and winning fantasy championships. And there's nothing better than that feeling when you get to that playoff time and making that awesome decision to start that one guy that puts you over the top. I mean, it's a bad feeling when it doesn't work out, but that stuff is what makes it all worth it. So absolutely appreciate you guys being here. I will put up this chat here, this comment, to let the rest of you know that are on the chat. The live chat is open. We're here to answer your fantasy football questions. I will stay with you guys. If you're on the stream and you have questions, jump in the chat. Let me know. We've gone through most of the content that we have already, but I will stay with here. I'll stay with you if you got more questions. I'll continue to go through the rest of the content that we have left, and then we'll call it a night at some point. But for the time being, it's almost 1:30 on the East Coast. If you're on the West Coast, love to have you off of the West Coast viewers here. By all means, we'll stay with it, and we'll keep talking football. Again, before we do that, I will let you guys know that if you want to stop back and join us tomorrow, this is our main show. It's the TFF Live Sunday pregame show. We're here every Sunday at 12 noon, live streaming right here on our YouTube channel. We answer all your fantasy football questions on that show. And in addition, we go through actives and inactives, get you some player updates, starts and sits. And then we also do a little recap from the previous week. So that is our main show. And that is every Sunday at 12 noon, right up until game time. Tonight, the Saturday Star Show, kind of an impromptu version, but we like doing these nighttime shows as well. We'll get you the rest of our information before we wrap up the rest of our content. We are the Fantasy Follow. We're a brand new YouTube channel, so we appreciate you finding us. I already talked a lot about that, but I will also say that we are on Twitter as well. You can find us at the Fantasy Follow, and that's fantasy spelled FNTSY. simply because if we spell out the whole name, it didn't fit. That's the only reason. But yeah, we're on Twitter, and if you want, you can always send us fantasy football questions during the week on Twitter using the hashtag AskTFFLive, and we go ahead and answer those questions live on our Sunday pregame show. So that's how you can reach us there. Facebook / The Fantasy Follow, and our website, thefantasyfollow.com. That's all of our good information. Let me see what we got here for the chats here. Looks like we got a new one. Here's an interesting one. Trust the Process Football Talk. Could you help me with a way of going live, like any app on the computer? I will tell you what I use. It's called StreamYard. I kind of stumbled upon it when I was just looking through YouTube for different. I don't even remember if I was actually looking for information on it. But I basically was looking for, trying to figure out what I was going to do in terms of taking this idea that I had for this channel and kind of turning it into, like, my whole deal with this is that I wanted to do this kind of in the vision of how I wanted to do it. So I wanted to not only be able to talk fantasy football with you guys, but I wanted to be able to add graphics and add other information and other elements that could help you guys not only have an enjoyable stream to watch, but also give you even more information to work you through, each of your week's matchups. So yeah, I would say what I use is called StreamYard. It's basically a live streaming app. It works like through your internet browser, so it's not even like hugely awful in terms of needing like a super powerful computer to do it. And then the rest of the stuff, like the graphics and everything that I do, aside from like what you're seeing right now, this chat is something that they have. The other graphics, like the promos that you saw, those are things that I built myself. So that's just me adding to it. So I kind of take what they have available, and I kind of push the envelope with my own stuff. And hopefully the combination, hope to try to provide, kind of like I said, my vision of what this stream can be. So yeah, that's what I use. I'm sure there are a lot of other ones out there, so it's not like that's the only one, but I can say for sure that is one that I use. And I know that's, I think it's been getting more use, because I know, like I was talking about my radio station, I did hear they started like using that for themselves as well for their live stream. So I at least feel like there are a decent amount of people that are out there and using that service. For me, it's been pretty decent. Like with anything, you look for how do you make it work for you. But yeah, that's what I use. I won't go on and on because I know a lot of you people want to talk about fantasy football, and here I'm talking about this streaming service. But yeah, that's what I use. Trust the Process. So yeah, if that's something you want to research, by all means, I wish you luck with finding that. And again, I'm glad to have you with us here, and we'll welcome you back to see you on future shows as well. So awesome. All right. So we'll put up that notification for all of you that our live chat remains open, and we are here to answer your fantasy football questions. And let me just see a follow-up here from Trust the Process. I'm going to check it out. Thanks. I'm going to subscribe. Awesome. Appreciate it. And I wish you luck. And I thank you for the sub. By all means, we're, like I said, as this channel continues to grow, we love having you guys with us, and we certainly want you to have those notifications. Again, of course, we want to grow those subscribers so that we can continue to do more nice things here. But by all means, we want you guys to be able to get that information as well. So that's very important to us. And thank you again for being here. Trust the Process Football Talk. All right, so there is our notification. Fantasy Follow live chat is open with us. We're here for a little while longer. Again, we will be here. If you guys have more questions, I will stay with you. I have a little bit of content left, but I want to get all your questions first. So if you guys keep jumping on with questions, I will stay with you, and we will talk football. I got all sorts of new graphics tonight, so glad to do it. K. Ellis Talks, returning viewer. Thank you for being back, K. Ellis. And I see a follow-up here. It says, just subbed. Awesome. Appreciate it, K. Ellis. I know you've been with us a few times. And so far, we hope that what we've been doing is that you're liking what you're seeing, and we hope that you've been crushing it in your leagues. So let's take a look at your question. Would you do any of these deals? Talking trades. Moore and Jones Jr. for Anderson, Watson for Big Ben, Claypool and Jones Jr. for Juju, Claypool and Jones Jr. for Deontay Johnson. I see Trust the Process jumped in. I will let you guys for sure absolutely go through that in the chat while I give you my opinions here. So I like what you're thinking here in the fact, I'm assuming that you're talking about Marvin Jones, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure that's probably who you're talking about here. I like what you're thinking given the fact that you've probably picked up Marvin Jones off the waiver wire, and you're going to take advantage of the fact that he has his highest value right now, because obviously at some point we expect Kenny Golladay to be back. are any of these deals that I like? So let's take a look at one by one. DJ Moore and Marvin Jones for Robbie Anderson. I do certainly think that Robbie Anderson of the two is the top guy there in Carolina. I want to take a look at Carolina's stats really quick. I know I do remember that you were asking about DJ Moore before. I certainly think in that particular deal that would be an upgrade. I think Robbie Anderson should probably continue to produce, return good values. I'm going to look at the fantasy football weeks to answer these questions for you. So I'm sorry, they're all fantasy football weeks. The fantasy playoff weeks is what I was trying to say. And let me call up both of those guys. So Robbie Anderson in the playoffs, they are playing in Week 14 Denver, in Week 15 Green Bay, and Week 16 Washington. And to help you through this, we'll put up our new graphic that we have tonight, and this is fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. You'll have to your chat is just a little bit tall, so I'll just pretend that that's not blocking that. Perhaps I'll fix that in the future. So the matchups in the fantasy playoffs, this is two players from the same team, so the matchups, I guess, don't even really have that much to do with this one. So yeah, all right, let's do this then. Just in simply talking about the first one, I like what you're saying, and you're basically going more for Anderson because Jones is not going to have a lot of value once Galladay's back. So this is a step up for Anderson. That one I think is a very reasonable deal to think about. Watson for Big Ben. I know that I'm not sure who it might have even been you, K. Ellis, that asked me about trying to trade Watson in a previous stream. Watson's playoff run is tough. Let's take a look at the quarterback points. Watson in the playoffs. Chicago. Yeah, Chicago week 14, Indianapolis week 15, Cincinnati week 16. So Chicago and Indy. Indy is obviously right now is the fewest fantasy points. I'll move this out of the way. The fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, and then Chicago the third fewest. That's a rough run. Week 16 for fantasy playoffs, they're playing Cincinnati. So right now, seventh most. That's a little bit better. I will take a look at Big Ben's rundown in that last stretch there. I would assume that you'd probably like Roethlisberger's run better. Yeah, Buffalo, Cincinnati, 14 and 15, and then Indianapolis week 16. So for your championship, a little bit worse. But the weeks leading up to it, those are both in green right now. So, yeah, I would think that Watson's a big name to trade away. It's a tough trade to make. But if you really like Big Ben and if you're keeping Claypool, then you're talking about a stack there that could be productive. So I don't think it's awful. Let me see your follow-up here. Your follow-up says, I plan to drop Jones before tomorrow's game for a kicker because I don't have room on my roster. So you're thinking about trading him instead of dropping him. Now, let me ask you, hit me back in the chat and tell me, are you able to make a trade like before tomorrow and have it be in place? Like I know Yahoo, you got to wait usually in most leagues like 2 days. So it sounds like you're talking about basically making that trade tonight instead of making the drop. That would obviously be another reason to throw it in there. I'm going to go back to your other two, Claypool and Marvin Jones for Juju. I don't like that one. I don't think Juju is an upgrade to Claypool. I think Claypool and Deontay Johnson, to me, are ahead of Juju in that rundown. And KLS, I'll see your follow-up here as we'll go through. So let me go back to this original one. Claypool and Marvin Jones for Deontay Johnson. That one is potentially just a lateral move. To me, like Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson are pretty close to each other. Earlier in the year, I would have said Deontay Johnson had the edge. But I think in those weeks that Johnson missed, like Claypool was so good that he kind of moved himself up. And that's kind of why I like both of those guys ahead of Juju. So I would say, no, I don't love the Claypool for Juju. I think Claypool and Jones for Deontay is a lateral move, so I don't know that you're gaining that much. And I think of those deals that you're mentioning, if you're trying to figure out which ones you like the best, without saying for sure whether or not I would or would not do them, I think Moore and Jones for Anderson, you can make a good argument to make that deal because I do feel like Anderson is the step up to DJ Moore in Carolina. Watson for Big Ben, that's going to come down to whether or not you feel comfortable getting rid of as big a name as Deshaun Watson for Ben Roethlisberger, who has been good and has been better this year, but has been up and down in the past. So that's more of a toss-up. I would say out of any of these four, I think the one that probably returns you the best value for what you're talking about is Moore and Anderson. Now, does that mean you absolutely do it? That's probably going to have to be a choice that you're going to make, but that's, to me, out of these ones, the best value that you can get out of these options, especially if you're going to cut Jones anyways. Then, yeah, I think that Moore for Anderson is basically what that trade is, and to me, that is a step up. I think Robbie Anderson has been good, and I think DJ Moore has been recently. So I would say of those things, that's my opinion. But by all means, like I said, I hope whichever way you go, whatever guy you pick up is the one out of the deal that just absolutely crushes it. So absolutely. Let me know how it goes for you. And again, appreciate the sub, and thank you for being back with us, Kay Ellis. Let me see. I see a couple of other chats here, and I'm going to go to Tyler next. And Tyler Smitherman says, Tyler's back. Welcome back, Tyler. Glad to have you back with the stream. We appreciate all of you regulars. And I'm wondering, like, it's past 1:30 on the East Coast, so I'm wondering, like, you guys are either late night, what do you call it? Late night hawks? I don't know. There's a word for it. Night owls, something like I am, or perhaps you're in another part of the country. But either way, we're glad that you're with us with the stream. You caught us just in time because we were almost done with our regular content, but we would rather chat with you guys. So you say Judy, Cooks, and Fulgham were all busts. Yeah, I agree. And I started Brandon Cooks. And that weather situation in Cleveland just crushed me. So yeah, it's fantasy football is tricky sometimes, man. You know, it's awesome when you play well, and then when you don't, you just sit there looking at that screen and you're like, oh, come on. But anyways, here's your question. You say this week I need two between Judy, Amari Cooper, Pittman, Fulgham, and Cooks. All right, so we're talking a whole bunch of wide receivers. So here's what I got: this brand new nice graphic tonight that shows all of these matchups for all these players, so we can talk through these. And let me go ahead and go back to my screen that tells me what time these games are so I can give you the best information possible. I have a gut to what you're asking already, but I want to use this information to back up my opinion because it's always better to use real information rather than just me spouting off. So anyways, all right, let's start with Jerry Jeudy for Denver. Let's see, playing in the 4 o'clock game against Miami. So if you look at matchups on the left side of the screen, Miami 13th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. I think Jeudy, I don't have it in front of me, but I think he had a decent amount of targets last week. So I don't think the targets were the issue there. However, I do think that there is potentially an injury at the quarterback spot there this week. I'm not sure who is playing there for them. So that's something you might need to take a look at. That might play a role in that one. Amari Cooper, I talked about him a little bit before. Dallas playing up against Minnesota. What time do they play at? They are a 4 o'clock window. That game is in Minnesota. The Vikings allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. I think Amari Cooper is the guy there in Dallas, despite any trepidations that you might have because of the quarterback situation there. Dalton is expected to play tomorrow. Cooper's their main guy, and therefore I think he's got to get his. I mean, I think that just has to be the way it is. I certainly think they're going to have to throw the ball there, potentially a decent scoring game. So I would say Cooper, my gut says he's a player that you can trust here, or at least more trustable than perhaps some of the other ones here. Michael Pittman for the Colts playing against Green Bay, a very interesting matchup at 4 o'clock. Green Bay, if you look on your list to the left, is allowing the 24th. So they're the 9th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. So right away, based on matchup, I will slide him down. Your quarterback play from Phillip Rivers there is a little bit questionable. I definitely don't think it's more steady than Dalton is. Travis Fulgham for Philadelphia playing at Cleveland. I think that with the return of a lot of your other players there, such as Jalen Reagor and Alshon Jeffrey, I think the target volume for Fulgham is going down. Doesn't mean there can't be good games, just means it's not, you're not going to get that bump in automatic volume that you've been getting. And Brandon Cooks for Houston against New England. Oh, I didn't talk about Cleveland. They are allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. I will say this, take a look at your weather for that game. We saw what happened against Houston. The weather is supposed to be bad. That game is in Cleveland at 1 o'clock tomorrow. They're expecting, I think I saw a 70% chance of rain. If the weather hits there again, this is going to turn into more of a running game. And we saw that what happened with Houston, potentially for that to happen again. Brandon Cooks, Houston at home against New England. New England allowing a 19th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Not great. So to me, I think I've established Amari Cooper as the first pick I would pick among those two. I would probably look to Jerry Jeudy actually next. That'd probably be my choice. And I haven't. I'm going to jump back to the chat here one moment. I want to look up Jerry Jeudy just to see if I'm right about the targets that he had last week. I don't know, again, if Drew Lock is playing. It does have Drew Lock listed as questionable, so let me see his report. Says he will start against the Dolphins. Okay, now Drew Lock, of course, it does show he had 4 interceptions last year. I will say that Denver's not a team that I necessarily watch every week. I don't happen to have any of their players on any of my teams. But let me see Jerry Jeudy. Last week, Jerry Jeudy, 8 targets. So in the last 4 games, Jeudy, here's the target share, 4, 10, 14, 8 in the last 4 games. And in terms of a half-point PPR screen that I'm looking at, his points were 4.2, 3, 9.3. I went back one game too far. 3, 9.3, 22, and 8.8. 125 yards in week 9 and a touchdown there. That was his best week. To me, he's the main guy there. He's been seeing the targets. Process of elimination between those other guys. I think I probably take Jeudy and Cooper as my 2. I think Cooper is the guy I like best out of those guys, and probably Jeudy second. Let me get this off the screen and let me jump back over here to the chat and see what we had here. And let me see if any of these other chats are follow-ups. See from Trust the Process, Tyler, I would do Cooks and Cooper since Dalton's back. Expected for Cooper to get 100 yards. I agree on Cooper, and I definitely can see an argument for Cooks as well, especially if New England puts Stephon Gilmore on Will Fuller. I can see that argument. And let me see here. What else we got? Jay Postman says Cooper hasn't had 100 yards since week 4. I agree. He hasn't had a touchdown either since week 6. I do think he sees the end zone this week. That's been my thought. He's a talented player, and Andy Dalton is not Ben DiNucci, and he's not Garrett Gilbert. So I think that's much more potential for Cooper. And like I said, I think he's the main guy there. Let me see. Sometimes I see you guys going back and forth. Awesome. And Jay Postman, I see this last one. Dallas offense as a whole is a disaster. I agree. Absolutely, I agree with that. However, I do think that playing against Washington, the matchup there carries the day. Dallas has not been good. However, they can't possibly, I guess they could possibly play terrible every single game. But I do like tomorrow's game as a chance for them to get a little bit, I don't want to say get right, but at least get it back in a better direction than it was. And again, to me, like if you're picking between those guys, obviously it's more difficult to trust him based on what he's done. But between those, let me put the original one back up. Between those guys, I do think that Cooper, again, talking about the matchup itself, let's see here. I've got it on a graphic, so let's get that. Here it is, Amari Cooper. Minnesota allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. We've seen that throughout the year, obviously. I'm just going to get a little bit of what I wrote down to back up that information. Let's see here. They have allowed, where is Amari Cooper? So Minnesota has allowed 22 or more fantasy points 5 times, giving up the 6th most passing yards in the league. Again, Cooper, no touchdowns since week 6. However, I certainly think there's at least a reasonable chance that they are not winning this game. They haven't been winning many of their games. And I do think that matchup carries the day. So I would pick Cooper out of those guys. And again, like I said, I think the next pick based on guys you trust the most, I would say Jerry Jeudy. But again, absolutely go with your gut. And I hope whichever 2 guys you pick, I hope you crush it with them. And Tyler, you say thank you, I'll be back. And I say no, thank you, Tyler, for being here. Again, we appreciate all you guys that are regular viewers for coming back, and all you guys that have subbed. And then for those of you that are new, we're glad to have you with us as well. And Trust the Process follows up and says this is probably their easiest matchup since Prescott got hurt. I would agree with that. And he likes Cooper. I shouldn't assume that it's a he. Could be a she. I don't know. You can tell me. I would agree with that. Like I said, it's tough. It's tough to trust guys who haven't been playing well. And I'll say I have Cooper on a lineup this week, and I am sitting him. But it just happens to be a lineup where, don't quote me because I don't have it in front of me, I just have to have a really good run of wide receivers available to me. It's not that I'm sitting him because I don't like the matchup. It's just that I have others that I feel better about. And certainly if you're in that situation, that is a case where, you can comfortably sit him. But hopefully, like I said, whichever guys you pick, I hope they crush it. And absolutely, for those of you that are on the stream, we'll put this back up on the screen. The live chat is still open for the rest of our show. We have gone through most of our content, but we will stay with you and we will talk fantasy football for as long as you guys have questions. And Trust the Process says, I'm a man. You should, if you're talking about your fantasy football team, if you remember that old ESPN commercial with Stuart Scott where he says, I'm the man. Like, that's what it should be. It should be, I'm the man, like your fantasy football teams, right? So anyways, that was my best attempt at humor at 1:45 in the morning. It probably wasn't all that good, but Trust the Process football talk. You say, I agree. Appreciate you guys. All right, so let's do this. Let's put this real quick back up again, the notification about the live chat. And then I got a little bit more content that I haven't gone through for those of you that have been just waiting for the rest of these Sunday Stars, been watching our stream the whole night, and you say, I can't believe Joe hasn't finished his Sunday Stars yet. When is he going to do that? Well, I'll do that for you right now. So let me jump back over here, and we left off at the tight end spot. We got two more guys that we haven't talked about yet, as I don't know why I call them Sunday Stars. It's Saturday Stars, meaning that they have the top matchup on Sunday. You would think since I named the stream myself, I would know what the name is. But again, it's 1:45 on the East Coast. All bets are off at this point. At any rate, Saturday Star, top matchups. Again, these are not necessarily starts and sits for tomorrow. They're not ranked in any order. This is just taking a look at the different players who I feel have top matchups and a chance to have nice games in Week 11. So we are at the last spot that we haven't talked about yet. Two more guys here left. Again, any more chats? If you got last-minute chats, we'll get to them. If not, we'll run through the rest of this content, and we'll probably call it a night at that point. This is Hayden Hurst for the Atlanta Falcons. Top matchup for tomorrow, playing at the New Orleans Saints. The Saints allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. New Orleans has allowed 10-plus fantasy points to 6 tight ends this year. I think I said tight end spot. I hope I did. And Hurst himself has had 10-plus fantasy points now in 4 straight games and 50-plus yards in those 4 games. This is a guy that I've liked all year long, Hayden Hurst. He's starting to turn it up a little bit. Now, granted, they've been without Kelvin Ridley for a lot of that stretch. Ridley expected to be back tomorrow. But again, the matchup here carries the day. And this is about top matchups tomorrow. I do like Hayden Hurst as good potential in that game. Again, a Saturday Star top matchup for Week 11. And the last guy we have here on our Saturday Stars, again, this is the tight end spot. This is Hunter Henry. And tomorrow when I do the starts and sits on the Sunday pregame show, a little sneak preview, I actually have Hunter Henry as my top start for the week. Henry playing the Jets. That game is in L.A. The Jets allowing the 10th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. They have allowed 10 or more fantasy points to 5 different tight ends this year. And they allowed 109 yards to Travis Kelce in Week 8. Of course, that is what Travis Kelce does. But Hunter Henry, last week, 13.0 fantasy points with a touchdown against Miami. I do like his potential in that game. I think Justin Herbert has been very good at the quarterback spot, so I think you have good quarterback play throwing it to him. I like Hunter Henry as a Saturday Star top matchup for Week 11. All right, so that is the run. I wanted to make sure I at least finish all that content. What I'm going to do, I see a couple of chats. I'm going to jump back to those momentarily. Before I do that, since we're through with all the content, I'm going to put up the promo for our show tomorrow. This is the TFF Live Sunday pregame show. Technically, it's not tomorrow anymore. It's a little bit later today. But we are with you every Sunday at noon, and we take you right up until game time. We go through, answer all your fantasy football questions as always. But we also give you a lot more content, bring you the active and active list for the 1 p.m. game, starts and sits, recap from last week, player updates, all that good stuff. Plenty of content to go through for you guys. That is our main show. Tonight was kind of more of an impromptu show. But that's every Sunday. So by all means, we'd love to have you join us on that show. And if you got questions for us, we take them on that show as well. And I'll put up the rest of our information here. Again, we are the Fantasy Follow. We are a brand new YouTube channel this year. We appreciate you finding us. If you haven't done so yet, or if you're new to the stream, please make sure and subscribe so that you can get those notifications for when we have new content as a new channel. We don't necessarily come up quite as high on all the searches, but as we continue to grow, we want to make sure that you are able to find out whenever we have new content. You can also find us on Twitter at the Fantasy Follow, and that's fantasy spelled FNTSY. And you can always send us your fantasy football questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskTFFLive during the week. And we take those questions and we answer them live on our Sunday pregame show. Facebook/Fantasy Follow, website fantasyfollow.com. All right, awesome. Let's go back to the chat here. I see some new ones. Let me see what I've got here down at the end. All right. Let me see here. got from J Postman 425. I heard some nonsense. A couple people were spewing in another live chat earlier, telling people to bench Davante Adams this week. I don't know how you can. I see the LOL, so I definitely I get that one. I'll trust the process followed up there, but I'll put these follow-ups there. It's a tough matchup, but he's literally the target for Rodgers. I definitely agree with that. And let me go. That is a trade, so I'll go to that one separately before I comment on this. Yeah, I mean, playing against Indianapolis, it's tough. But this is kind of what I was saying earlier in tonight's show. Like, to me, like, this matchup is, when you're this late in the year, this is one of those matchups where some questions are going to be answered between these two teams. Like, on either side, like, Indy has been good on D, but when you look at their run of games, like, when you look back at all those games where they had nice fantasy days, DST-wise, a lot of those teams are in the green. And now they have this run of teams in the red, tough fantasy matchups. So to me, like, now you're playing a real super tough offense that is going to get there against almost anybody. So we're going to find out, is Indy's D really what we think it is, or does it have more to do with the teams they've played? On the same side of things, it's Green Bay's offense. Are we going to see Green Bay continue to do what they do, or are they going to be slowed down by that Indy D? So I think it's kind of an interesting matchup to see who wins out. Like, one of these two sides is going to prove themselves, and the other one, we're going to leave this game saying, well, we're not sure, that they were what we thought they were. They are what they thought they were. Yeah, so this is a really interesting game. This is a 4:00 game. I'm glad it's kind of in a window with less games, because this is one I kind of like to watch a little bit more. As far as the Davante Adams thing, I don't know how. Name me players you're going to start over Davante Adams any week. Like, I don't see how you could ever. I don't see him being someone you could sit. Like, there's certain players. That's why players aren't talked about in start sits. When they're auto starts, you're playing like, yeah, this week Derrick Henry against Baltimore. That's a tough matchup. Tell me who I can start over Derrick Henry that I'm gonna make that move. Like, I'm just not gonna do it. You drafted Davante Adams probably in the first round, at the end of the first round, or perhaps if he dropped it at the beginning of the second round. Like, you're just not sitting Davante Adams. And Postman, you follow up Jay Postman. I think the Colts defense is good, but not to that extent. And I agree with that. Like, I think we're going to see, like, I literally have, in one of my rosters, I picked up Indy's D to stream them earlier in the season. And then as they started to look good, stuck with them. And I've continued to look at that run of games and the tough matchups. And I keep thinking to myself, if I need to make a cut, am I cutting them at this point? Like, I don't know, but I think this game is going to tell us some answers to that. So I think it's an interesting game to watch. But yeah, I definitely like Aaron Rodgers. I don't have him as a sit. I don't necessarily have him as a start this week because of the matchup. But I certainly don't have him as a sit, and I certainly wouldn't think of doing the same thing to Davante Adams. And then I see this next one here from Jay Postman 425, and you say, I'm trying to trade DK Metcalf for Aaron Jones straight up, but doesn't look at his trades. All right, so I'm going to comment on this is my chance to throw out a quick opinion towards the end of this live stream. There is nothing more frustrating than when you send a trade to somebody and it sits there, and then they don't do anything with it. And you look around and you try to see, like, okay, has this person, like, have they done anything on their waiver wire? Have they been on their, like, site to see anything? Like, why is this sitting there? Like, and literally, there was one of the leagues that I play in that I sent one of the players a trade. And during that week, while that trade sat there, he went in and he posted a comment in the message area to his opponent that he was playing this week around the time of the Thursday night game. I had already sent the trade, saying something about how I can't believe I have to play you this week. This is the worst week for me. I read it. I'm like, what are you, like, why? Like, just, why are you leaving this trade sitting there? You're going to go post a message. Like, answer. If you don't want the trade, say no. If you want to counter the trade, counter the trade. Like, I don't understand the purpose of leaving them there. Like, I feel like that's just why. Like, I don't know. Like, why do that? Like, answer the. And I'm not trying to make, as a rule, I'm not trying to make trades that are just awful for someone else's side. Like, I usually try to look at their team, find teams that have need in an area where I have a strength, look for a deal that's reasonable, but something that I feel like improves my team. If it improves your team too, then great. As long as I'm not playing you that week, then I'm probably going to offer you a deal. And why leave it sitting there? Like, so that's my little chance to say, like, the worst is when people leave trades sitting there. So yeah, as far as Metcalf for Jones, without looking at the actual run of matchups down the line to actually say anything about that. I guess I'm sure it depends on. I'm guessing you probably have strength at wide receiver, and you need a little bit of help at running back. So that brings it into play for sure. But there's nothing worse than when you send someone a trade and I can't stand that. But what are you going to do? Another interesting. I saw somebody in one of my leagues this week, picked up off the waiver wire Stephon Diggs, and I'm like, what just happened? Like, why did somebody cut Stephon Diggs? And I'm looking around, I'm trying to figure out, like, are these people that like know each other? And because in that particular league, they reasonably might not be people that know each other. And I'm trying to understand why somebody cut Stephon Diggs unless they actually made a misclick and like didn't mean to cut him. But yeah, and I didn't even realize that he was there. But somebody did. And literally I looked, it was a waiver claim. And this is the part of the show, I guess, where I just talk about anything. That's fine. It was a waiver claim. And so I looked and I wanted to see how many people put in a claim because it was a Saturday waiver, which means he was cut on two. So Yahoo leagues, if most of you probably play Yahoo leagues, know what I'm talking about, but that's the way Yahoo leagues are set up. Tuesday night waivers, Wednesday they go through. The people that are cut Saturday, they're, overnight or midnight Friday night Pacific Coast time, technically, is when you're picking them up as a waiver. The person that picked up Stephon Diggs, when I clicked on to see the waiver offers, was the only person. Now, granted, I'll say for me, I didn't even realize that he was there. But, like, it's a 10-team league. You're telling me that only one person realized? I guess it's possible because I didn't. But only one person realized that Stephon Diggs had been cut and put in a claim for him. Like, that just seems sketchy to me. And it's weird because it's a league where really, for the most part, I don't think the people in the league actually know each other. So I don't know. I guess you could mix. I will say that I literally, let me, before I continue on with these random thoughts to end up this broadcast, let me go back to just to follow up on these other chats. Jay Postman, you followed up about the Colts defense. They played the Jets, Browns, Bears, and Lions. Yeah. And I don't have the run in front of me, but the run from here on out is not easy. And then you follow up with the Metcalf point about has a horrible playoff schedule. Jones has one of the best. Certainly makes a lot of sense. And then I see about, are they trying to forfeit? And I assume you're talking about the Diggs and trust the process. Football Talk says they're crazy. So that's, I'll wrap it up with this for the night and then we'll call it a night. I just I was baffled, but I will say this in defense of, if that did happen to be a misclick, I absolutely, in one of my leagues, I'm pretty sure it was last year, could have been the year before, I had picked up over the course of the year Ty Williams for the Lions. It was probably when Kerryon Johnson got hurt, and it looked like he was potentially going to be the guy there at the running back spot. So I was like, great. I went out and got him. Pretty sure I spent my waiver priority to get him. Didn't turn out to be anything great. That's fine. This is what happens. Well, on that same roster, I had Tyrell Williams from the Raiders, who at that time was probably their number one receiver and certainly wasn't somebody I was trying to cut. But in the process of me making a move in that league, and it wasn't the next move that I made that caused this, it wasn't a waiver claim, so it's not like I could go back and recheck it. It was my own stupidity because it certainly asks you, like, are you sure? So instead of cutting Ty Williams, I cut Tyrell Williams. And I literally, as I was hitting the button that says, okay, literally looked up and saw who it was as I hit it. And it was one of those slow motion, no! And I was like, oh no. And there he goes. And that was it, the end of it. So I was like, great. Well, I guess I might as well now cut Ty Williams for somebody else. And that was the end of Tyrell Williams on my roster for that year. Fortunately, he really didn't play that well after that. So it's probably saved me the headache of having him in my lineup and not play well. I guess he's still hurt this year for the Raiders. But yeah, I don't know if you could put that at the same level as cutting Stephon Diggs. I mean, who else were you cutting that was close to? I mean, at least with mine, they both said T. Williams. Is there another S. Diggs that I'm not aware of? I don't know, just a weird deal, but that happens. So at any rate, I guess these things happen. But Anyways, yeah, it's 2 o'clock on the East Coast. We've been on with you guys for a little over 2.5 hours. So, hey, it's been a good night of fantasy football talk. It's been fun. We got a great slate of games coming up tomorrow. Let's see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in the 1 o'clock window. We got another 4 games at 4 o'clock, and then the night game, obviously, Sunday, and then the Monday night game. A lot of good fantasy matchups to look at. We're getting closer and closer to that playoff time, so it's time to really turn it on for all you guys, myself included. I hope you guys all crush it. I want you guys to all have great weeks for Week 11. Hopefully some of you are already off to a good start from the Thursday night game. But, you know, this is it. Let's get it done. Let's get those W's. Let's make that playoff run and work towards that championship. We'll put up our information one more time before we close it out for the night. We're back with you in about 10 hours, not that long from now. Sunday pregame show, 12 noon. We'll go through all of the information for tomorrow's matchups, get you ready, and answer your fantasy football questions the entire show. So if you're up early after being up late with us tonight, feel free to join us. I'll give you the rest of our information. The Fantasy Follow, we're a brand new channel this season. We appreciate you all being here, all of you regulars and anybody that's new. If you are new to the stream or if you haven't done so yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We want to make sure you get those notifications whenever we have new content. We know that as a new channel, we don't necessarily come up quite as high on the searches as we continue to grow. So we want to make sure that you find out when we have new information. On Twitter, at the Fantasy Follow, and that's fantasy spelled FNTSY. Again, any fantasy football questions during the week, you can send them to our Twitter account using the hashtag AskTFFLive. We'll take those and answer them live on our Sunday pregame show, Facebook.com/fantasyfollow, and our website, fantasyfollow.com. Another good night. Hope you enjoyed the Saturday Stars, all of our top matchups. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll have our actual starts and sits for all those games. We look forward to another good day of football tomorrow and hopefully a lot of high-scoring fantasy outputs for all of your teams. So we will stay until then. As always, good luck in fantasy, and we'll see you next time.